He missed his flight, but met a woman who made him never want to leave that airport again. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready, let's start. Jason Miller prided himself on never being late. His entire life ran on a perfectly calibrated schedule, down to the minute. Even his morning meditation app was programmed to last exactly 7 minutes, though he usually spent 6 of those checking emails. But today, the universe had other plans. Final boarding call for British Airways Flight 285 to London Heathrow. The announcement echoed through Terminal F of Atlanta International Airport. Jason's Italian leather shoes squeaked against the polished floor as he sprinted, his laptop bag bouncing awkwardly against his hip. His perfectly pressed navy suit was now adorned with an impressive coffee constellation spreading across his chest like a modern art disaster. 20 minutes earlier, he'd been confidently striding through security, mentally rehearsing his presentation for the London board meeting, a pitch that could cement his position as the youngest global marketing director in his firm's history. Then chaos struck in the form of a pigtailed tornado named Lucy, age approximately 6, who had chosen that exact moment to practice her figure skating routine in the middle of the terminal. The coffee cup he'd been holding didn't stand a chance. "Oops," the girl's mother had called out, barely looking up from her phone, while Jason lay sprawled on the floor, hot coffee seeping through his $300 shirt. Now he was running, sprinting past gates, dodging elderly couples and duty-free shoppers, with the desperation of a man whose entire career trajectory might depend on the next 3 minutes. "I'm sorry, sir," the gate agent said, her practiced smile carrying just a hint of genuine sympathy. "The jet bridge has been retracted. We can get you on the next flight to London at—" She clicked through her computer. 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening. The words hit him like a physical blow. His presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m. London time the following day. Even if he somehow managed to teleport himself across the Atlantic right now, he'd still be cutting it close. "There has to be something else," he insisted, running his fingers through his usually immaculate dark hair. "United? Delta? Hell, I'll fly Air Kazakhstan if I have to." The gate agent's fingers danced across her keyboard. "I'm afraid all direct flights to London today are fully booked. I can put you on standby for—" "Standby," Jason repeated, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. He, Jason Miller, who had built his entire reputation on being prepared, reliable, and always in control, was now at the mercy of standby lists and tomorrow's weather patterns. His phone buzzed. A message from his boss. "Landing in London now. Can't wait for your presentation tomorrow. Board's particularly interested in the digital transformation strategy." Jason stared at the message until the words blurred together. He'd spent 3 months preparing for this meeting, analyzing market trends, crafting the perfect pitch. And now, thanks to a miniature ice skater and her criminally negligent mother, it was all falling apart. The universe, apparently not content with its current level of mockery, chose that moment to add one final touch to his humiliation. As he attempted to sit in one of the uncomfortable airport chairs, he actually missed, and landed unceremoniously on the floor, his coffee-stained shirt coming untucked in the process. And that's when he heard it, a laugh. Not a cruel one, but a rich, melodious sound that somehow managed to be both sympathetic and amused at the same time. "You have the air of a man who only sits on the floor when life kicks his schedule in the teeth." He turned toward the voice, a sharp retort ready on his lips, but the words died somewhere between his brain and his mouth. She sat 3 seats away, a worn copy of Jazz by Toni Morrison open in her lap. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the harsh airport lighting, and her natural hair was styled in an elegant twist that somehow managed to look both professional and effortlessly cool. She wore a simple burgundy dress that hugged curves that had no business existing in an airport terminal, and her eyes, God, her eyes held a mixture of amusement and challenge that made his heart skip several very important beats. "I'll have, you know," he managed, attempting to salvage some dignity, "that I frequently sit on floors, by choice, sometimes even deliberately." She hummed, clearly unconvinced. "And I'm sure that coffee art on your shirt is also a deliberate fashion choice." Despite himself, Jason felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "Absolutely. It's a limited edition Starbucks collaboration. Very exclusive." She laughed again, and this time he felt something in his chest unlock. Just a little. "I'm Ava," she said, closing her book but keeping her finger between the pages. "Ava Brooks. And you look like you could use a drink." "Jason Miller," he replied, finally pulling himself up from the floor. "And I look like I could use several drinks. Unfortunately, I have to stay alert for the standby list." Ava raised an eyebrow. "The standby list that just cleared for the next 6 hours?" She gestured to the now empty gate screen. "Face it, Mr. Miller, you're grounded until tomorrow, just like the rest of us, mere mortals." He looked at the screen, then at his coffee-stained shirt, then at Ava's knowing smile. For the first time in what felt like years, his schedule was completely, utterly blank. "You know what?" he said, surprising himself. "I have about 1 million frequent flyer points. There's a lounge upstairs with surprisingly decent wine." "Are you inviting me to drink overpriced airport wine with a stranger who can't even sit in a chair properly?" "I prefer to think of it as networking with a fellow stranded traveler who happens to have excellent taste in literature." Ava's eyes sparkled with something that looked dangerously like interest. "Well, Mr. Miller," she said, finally marking her place in the book and standing up, "I suppose there are worse ways to spend an unexpected layover." As they walked toward the lounge, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping off a carefully planned path and onto something far more interesting. His phone buzzed again in his pocket, probably another message about tomorrow's presentation, but for once he let it wait. After all, he had a feeling this particular delay might be worth his while. The Delta Sky Club lounge was a sanctuary of soft lighting and muted conversations, worlds away from the fluorescent chaos below. Jason watched as Ava ran her finger along the rim of her wineglass, a 2018 Cabernet that cost more points than he cared to admit. They'd claimed a corner, spot by the window, where the setting sun painted Atlanta's skyline in shades of amber and rose. "So," Ava said, leaning back in her plush chair, "tell me about the meeting that's important enough to make a grown man sprint through an airport looking like a Jackson Pollock painting." Jason loosened his coffee-stained tie. "Global marketing, director position, everything I've worked for these past 8 years, wrapped up in one presentation." He took a sip of wine. "Well, technically tomorrow's presentation, which is now," he checked his phone, "officially impossible to make." "Impossible?" Ava raised an eyebrow. "That's a big word for someone who probably has synergy and paradigm shift in his daily vocabulary. Says the woman reading Toni Morrison in an airport, not exactly light travel reading. Some of us like our baggage with a side of literary genius." She smiled, and Jason noticed a small dimple in her left cheek. "Besides, jazz is actually perfect for airports. It's all about the rhythms of life, how sometimes the most beautiful melodies come from the unexpected notes." "Is that your subtle way of telling me to embrace this disaster?" "Oh, there's nothing subtle about me, Mr. Miller." She held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and Jason felt his pulse quicken. "I'm just saying that sometimes the universe has better plans than our carefully crafted PowerPoint presentations." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with the gentle clink of glasses and distant announcements. Through the window, planes took off into the darkening sky, their lights blinking like Morse code messages to nowhere. "Your turn," Jason said finally. "What brings Ava?" Brooks to Terminal F on a Monday evening? Something flickered across her face, a shadow of something deeper than their wine-loose banter. I was supposed to be in Chicago right now, actually, giving a guest lecture at Northwestern about African-American literature in the digital age. But she traced a pattern on the table with her finger. Sometimes you need to step back to move forward. That sounds suspiciously like something from a self-help book, says the man who probably has a Tony Robbins audiobook on his phone right now. Jason felt his ears redden. He did, in fact, have 2 Tony Robbins audiobooks in his library. You're deflecting. Am I? Ava's eyes danced with challenge. Or am I just letting you think you're figuring me out while I'm actually reading you like one of my favorite books? And what's your analysis so far? She leaned forward, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle and spicy that made him think of warm nights and whispered secrets. You're the kind of man who plans his spontaneity. Your watch probably costs more than my monthly rent, but you check your phone for the time. You have everything figured out. Career trajectory, retirement plan, probably even the exact number of steps between your apartment and your office. But right now, she gestured to his stained shirt, right now you're the most alive I bet you've been in years. The words hit him with unexpected force. He wanted to argue, to defend his carefully constructed life, but something in her assessment rang uncomfortably true. Well, he managed, reaching for levity, I usually prefer my epiphanies without coffee stains, but I'll take what I can get. See, progress already. Ava's laugh was warm and genuine. Next thing you know, you'll be missing flights on purpose. Let's not get crazy. But he was smiling too, and it felt real in a way his LinkedIn profile photo smile never did. A notification popped up on his phone. Another message from his boss. Jason surprised himself by sliding the phone face down on the table. Look at you, choosing human connection over digital obligation, Ava teased. I should alert the media. I prefer to think of it as strategic networking. Is that what we're calling this? She gestured between them with her wineglass. What would you call it? Ava considered him for a moment, her expression softening. I'd call it an unexpected note in the melody, the kind that makes you stop and listen differently. Outside their window, a plane lifted into the night sky, its lights cutting through the darkness. Jason watched it disappear into the clouds, thinking about destinations and departures, about carefully plotted courses and the thrill of veering off map. You know what I haven't done in approximately forever, he said suddenly. Relaxed. Had dinner in an airport without checking my email. Ava's smile widened. Well, that sounds like a tragedy we need to remedy immediately. She stood up, smoothing her dress. I happen to know there's a surprisingly decent sushi place down in Terminal E. That is, if you're willing to slum it with the regular travelers. Jason looked at his phone one last time, then stood up. Lead the way, Professor Brooks. Oh, we're not there yet, Mr. Miller. You haven't earned the right to my titles. But she was smiling as she said it, that dimple making another appearance. As they left the lounge, Jason realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this kind of anticipation. Not for a meeting or a presentation, but for something as simple as dinner with a beautiful stranger who seemed to see right through him. His coffee-stained shirt had dried into abstract patterns. His perfectly scheduled day had derailed completely. And somehow, impossibly, he was okay with all of it. More than okay. The universe, it seemed, had plans of its own. And for once, in his life, Jason Miller was ready to listen. Sushi Zen sat like an island of calm in Terminal E's bustling food court. The small restaurant's paper lanterns cast a warm glow that somehow made the airport's institutional lighting feel miles away. Jason watched, fascinated, as Ava expertly manipulated her chopsticks to dip a piece of yellowtail into soy sauce. So you're avoiding Chicago, he said, picking up their earlier conversation. Want to tell me why? Ava's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. Straight to the heart of it, huh? What happened to that corporate talent for dancing around difficult subjects? Must be the wine, he smiled. Or maybe you're rubbing off on me. She set her chopsticks down, considering him with those penetrating eyes. It's complicated. We've got time. My next flight isn't until tomorrow evening, remember? Fine. Ava took a sip of sake. You ever have one of those moments where you realize you're living someone else's dream? Jason thought about his upcoming London presentation, the carefully plotted career path that had seemed so clear this morning. Maybe. Well, I was supposed to give this lecture about how digital platforms are transforming African American literature. It's a hot topic, very tenure-track friendly. She traced the rim of her sake cup, except I don't believe half of what I wrote in the paper. What do you mean? I think we're losing something. Everyone's so focused on likes and retweets and viral moments that we're forgetting what literature is really about, the raw, messy, beautiful truth of being human. She laughed softly. God, that sounds pretentious, doesn't it? No, Jason said, surprised by how much he meant it. It sounds honest. Their eyes met across the table, and something electric passed between them. Your turn, Ava said, breaking the moment. What's really waiting for you in London? Besides the obvious, career advancement. Jason started to give his usual answer about market growth and digital transformation, but stopped himself. Validation, I guess. Proof that all these years of 60-hour weeks and missed family events were worth it. Were they? That's a loaded question coming from someone who just admitted to running away from her own career opportunity. Touché. Ava raised her sack cup in mock salute. But I'm not running away. I'm just choosing a different path. And what path is that? I'm starting a literary magazine. Old school, print and everything. Focusing on new voices, raw stories, the kind of writing that makes you feel something real. Her voice grew animated. We've got this amazing collective of writers, poets from Detroit, storytellers from New Orleans, voices that deserve to be heard without algorithms deciding their worth. That sounds terrifying, Jason said, and incredible. Terrifying is my specialty lately. She grinned. Hence drinking sake with a stranger in an airport instead of giving a safe, tenure-friendly lecture in Chicago. A chef behind the sushi counter called out an order, the sharp sound cutting through their bubble of intimacy. Jason realized they'd been leaning closer and closer across the table. You know what's really terrifying, he said, not moving back. I can't remember the last time I did something without calculating the ROI first. ROI? Ava's eyes sparkled with amusement. Please tell me you're not actually using business terms to describe your life choices. Says the woman who quoted Toni Morrison to justify missing her flight. At least Morrison has soul. When's the last time a quarterly report made you feel alive? The question hit harder than he expected. When was the last time anything had made him feel truly alive? Before today. Before this woman with her challenging eyes and fearless dreams walked into his carefully ordered world. Tell me about your magazine, he said instead of answering. What's it called? Raw Notes. She pulled out her phone, showing him a mock-up of a cover, stark, beautiful, with an illustration of a jazz musician whose instrument morphed into flowing words. Because life isn't edited and polished, the best stories come from the raw places. Like airport floors. Exactly like airport floors. She smiled that dimpled smile again. Sometimes you have to fall on your ass to look up and see something new. Their food arrived, a gorgeous spread of sashimi and rolls that looked too artistic for airport cuisine. As they ate, Jason found himself sharing things he hadn't told anyone. About his parents' expectations, about the gnawing emptiness that sometimes hit him in his corner office. about the novel he'd started writing in college before practical considerations took over. Ava listened, really listened, in a way that made him feel both exposed and completely safe. She challenged his assumptions, laughed at his corporate speak, and somehow made him see his own life from angles he'd never considered. "You should write again," she said as they finished the last pieces of sushi. "You've got stories in you, Jason Miller. Real ones, not just PowerPoint presentations. Is this a recruitment pitch for your magazine?" "Maybe." She reached across the table and for the first time touched his hand. Her fingers were warm against his skin. "Or maybe I just think the world needs fewer pie charts and more truth." The touch sent electricity up his arm, and suddenly the airport around them felt very far away. Jason looked at their hands, then at Ava's face, open, challenging, beautiful in the paper lantern light. "What if I'm not sure what my truth is anymore?" "That," she said softly, "is exactly where all the best stories begin." An announcement echoed through the terminal, something about a gate change, but neither of them moved. They sat there, hands touching, surrounded by the strange intimacy of their temporary sanctuary, while travelers rushed past with their rolling suitcases and their predetermined destinations. Jason had never felt less certain about where he was headed, and somehow that felt exactly right. After dinner, the airport had transformed. The day's frenetic energy had settled into something quieter, more intimate. The crowds had thinned, leaving behind an almost dreamlike quality to the sprawling terminals. Jason and Ava walked side by side, their footsteps echoing off the high ceilings. "Okay, your turn," Ava said, bumping his shoulder playfully. They'd been trading questions for the past 20 minutes, each one diving deeper than the last. "Most embarrassing corporate moment, besides today's coffee incident." "That wasn't corporate, that was fate's intervention. I want your real skeleton in the business suit closet." Jason laughed, loosening his stained tie further. "Fine, 2 years. Ego, major presentation to the board. I had this whole elaborate metaphor planned about market penetration and growth strategies. Oh no. Oh yes. Somehow, and I still don't know how, every single slide had replaced the word analysis with anal." He shook his head at the memory. 15 slides of pure mortification. Ava's laughter echoed through the terminal, drawing looks from a few late-night travelers. "Please tell me you didn't notice until you were presenting." "Made it through 3 slides before someone cleared," their throat very deliberately. "And you still got promoted." Apparently my shade of red was very endearing. He smiled at her continued laughter. "Your turn. Worst teaching moment?" "First day as a guest lecturer," Ava said, leading them toward a quiet corner of Terminal C. I was so nervous I kept quoting the wrong Morrison novel. Mixed up Beloved and Song of Solomon for a solid 30 minutes before a freshman finally called me out. Brutal. "Humbling," she corrected, settling onto a padded bench near a darkened gate. "Sometimes we need moments that remind us we're human." Jason sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her arm against his. "Is that what this is? A reminder that we're human?" Ava turned to face him, her expression softening. "This is something else entirely." The air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Jason became acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, of the subtle scent of her perfume, of the way her eyes reflected the dim gate lights. "You know what I haven't done in forever?" Ava said suddenly, standing up. "Something completely ridiculous." Before Jason could ask what she meant, she had grabbed his hand and was pulling him to his feet. Her hand felt perfect in his, like it belonged there. "There's this thing about airports at night," she said, leading him toward the terminal's moving walkway. "They become these liminal spaces where normal rules don't apply." The walkway was empty, its black belt moving silently through the quiet. Terminal. Ava stepped on, pulling Jason with her, but instead of walking forward, she turned to face him. "Dance with me." "Here?" Jason glanced around the empty terminal. "On a moving walkway. Would you prefer the coffee-stained floor?" Her eyes challenged him, dared him to step out of his comfort zone one more time. And then, because this day had already thrown every rule out the window, Jason Miller, youngest executive on track, for global marketing director, master of spreadsheets and strategic planning, pulled Ava Brooks into his arms and began to dance. They moved against the walkway's motion, creating their own strange momentum. Ava hummed something soft and jazzy, probably from her beloved Morrison novel, and Jason found himself swaying to her improvised rhythm. "You're pretty good at this for a corporate robot," she murmured, her head resting against his shoulder. "My mother insisted on ballroom dancing lessons, said they'd be important for corporate functions." And were they? "This is the first time I've actually enjoyed using them." They reached the end of the walkway, but neither seemed inclined to let go. Instead, they stood there, swaying slightly, while the belt moved steadily beneath their feet. "Jason?" Ava's voice was soft against his neck. What are we doing?" It was a loaded question, heavy with implications. What were they doing? Two strangers in an airport, dancing on a moving walkway, sharing secrets and sushi and something. That felt dangerously like possibility. "I have no idea," he admitted. "For the first time in my life, I don't have a 5-year plan for this moment." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "And how does that feel?" "Terrifying." "Me?" He reached up to touch her cheek, his thumb brushing over that perfect dimple. "Exhilarating." "Good answer." The distance between them seemed to shrink, the airport's mechanical hum fading into background noise. Ava's lips parted slightly, and Jason felt himself being drawn in like gravity, like terminal velocity, like every force of nature he'd spent his life trying to control. "Final boarding call for Flight 2187 to San Francisco," a voice boomed through the terminal speakers, shattering the moment. They jumped apart, both laughing nervously. The spell wasn't broken exactly, but it had shifted, become something more delicate and real. "We should probably get off this walkway before security decides we're a threat to airport functionality," Ava said, but she took his hand again as they stepped off. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their fingers intertwined, until they found themselves in a quiet observation area. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the runways, where planes took off and landed in a choreographed dance of lights against the night sky. "You know what scares me most about my magazine idea?" Ava said suddenly, pressing her free hand against the cool glass. "What?" "That it might actually work. That I might be right about people still wanting something real, something they can hold in their hands and feel in their hearts." She turned to him. "What scares you most about London?" "That it might not be enough." The words came out before he could filter them. "That I'll get everything I've been working for and still feel like I'm missing something essential." "Like what?" Jason looked at their joined hands, at this brilliant, beautiful woman who had walked into his life via spilled coffee and missed connections. "Like this. Like moments that don't fit into any agenda, but matter more than all the meetings that do." A plane took off in front of them, its lights cutting through the darkness as it climbed into the sky. They watched it ascend in silence, both aware that something between them was ascending too, rising toward an altitude where the air was thin and every breath mattered. "We should find coffee," Ava said finally, though she made no move to leave. "Real coffee, not the kind that assassinates designer suits." "Is that your subtle way of saying you're not ready for this moment to end?" She squeezed his hand. "There's nothing subtle about the way I feel right now, Jason Miller." And there, in front of the airport windows where hundreds of journeys began and ended every day, Jason realized he was embarking on the most important one of his life, even if he had no idea where it would land. Most of the airport's coffee shops had closed for the night, their gates drawn and lights dimmed. Jason and Ava's quest for real coffee had turned into something of a terminal-hopping adventure, their hands still linked as they explored the quiet corridors. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous," Ava said after their third shuttered cafe. "How does an airport not have 24-hour coffee? Isn't that against some international travel law? I'm starting to think the universe is conspiring against us again." Jason checked his watch. Nearly midnight. Though this time I'm not complaining about the detour. They'd reached Terminal A, the oldest part of the airport. Here, the modernized shine gave way to a more lived-in feel, worn carpeting, dated, light fixtures, and signs that still showed their 1980s heritage. "Hold up." Ava tugged his hand, pointing to a warm glow spilling from around a corner. "Either that's divine intervention or—" "The Coffee Nook," Jason read from the vintage-looking sign. "Open 24 hours. The small shop looked like it had been transported from another era. No sleek espresso machines or digital menu boards, just a cozy space with mismatched furniture and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Behind the counter, an elderly woman with silver hair and knowing eyes looked up from her crossword puzzle. Her name tag read Rose. "Well, well," she said, her voice warm and slightly amused. "You two look like you've got a story." "That obvious, huh?" Ava smiled. "Honey, I've been serving coffee in this airport for 32 years. I know the difference between regular travelers and people living through something special." Rose set down her pencil. "What'll it be?" "Whatever's strongest," Jason said, reaching for his wallet. "And sweetest for me," Ava added. Rose moved with practiced efficiency, preparing their drinks. "You know," she said as she worked, "my Henry and I met in an airport, Denver, 1976. Blizzard had everything shut down for 2 days." She smiled at the memory. Sometimes the best connections happen when plans fall apart. She served their drinks in real ceramic mugs. "No paper cups here." "On the house," she said when Jason tried to pay. "Consider it my investment in serendipity." They found a small table in the corner, surrounded by framed black and white photos of planes and pilots from decades past. The coffee was perfect. Jason's dark and rich, Ava's doctored with what seemed like half the shop's supply of cream and sugar. "So," Ava said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "what happens when the sun comes up?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Until now, they'd existed in this magical bubble of airport time, where real-world consequences seemed distant and hazy. "Well," Jason said slowly, "technically I have a flight to London at 8 p.m. "Technically," Ava echoed, stirring her coffee, "and technically I should be in Chicago right now, preparing for a lecture I don't want to give. But I'm sitting in a time capsule of a coffee shop with a man in a coffee-stained suit, drinking the best bad coffee I've ever had, and I'm not sure I want any of this to be technical anymore." From behind the counter, the soft sounds of jazz began playing. Rose had turned on an old radio, the music crackling slightly through vintage speakers. The melody was smooth, intimate, like it was being played just for them. "Tell me something." "Real," Ava said suddenly. "Something you've never told anyone else." Jason looked into his coffee, then back at her. "I hate my job." "That's not a secret, that's written all over you." "Fine." He took a deep breath. "I'm terrified of turning into my father. He spent 40 years climbing the corporate ladder, got everything he wanted, and now he can't remember how to want anything else. When my mom died last year, he organized her funeral like it was a board meeting, efficient, practical, no room for mess or emotion. Ava reached across the table, her fingers intertwining with his. "I'm so sorry about your mom." "She used to write poetry," Jason continued, his voice soft. "Had notebooks full of it. Dad had them all packed away in storage within a week. Said it was time to move forward." He laughed without humor. "You know what I did? I made a spreadsheet to track the grieving process. Actually mapped out the 5 stages like they were project milestones. And how did that work out? About as well as you'd expect. Turns out grief doesn't follow Gantt charts." Ava squeezed his hand. "Your turn. Ask me something real. Why are you really running from Chicago?" She was quiet for a moment, tracing the rim of her mug with her free hand. "Because I'm tired of being the token black academic they trot out to prove how diverse and progressive they are. Because every time I try to talk about what literature really means, how it saves lives and breaks hearts and makes us human, someone wants to turn it into a demographic study or a market analysis." She met his eyes. "Because I'm afraid if I keep playing their game, I'll forget how to feel the words instead of just analyzing them." "Is that what your magazine is about? Feeling the words?" "It's about truth. Raw, messy, beautiful truth. No algorithms, no SEO optimization, no viral strategies. Just stories that matter, voices that need to be heard." Her eyes lit up as she spoke, and Jason felt something in his chest tighten. "I've got everything lined up, writers ready to contribute, a printer in Atlanta who believes in the project, even some initial funding. All I need is the courage to jump. The courage to believe I'm not crazy for wanting something real in a digital world." From the radio, a saxophone solo soared through the quiet shop. Rose had disappeared into the back, leaving them alone with the music and the growing weight of possibility between them. "You know what's crazy?" Jason said, running his thumb over her knuckles. "I want to read every single issue of your magazine. I want to write something for it, something true, something that would make my mom proud. I want—" He stopped, realizing how much he meant what he was about to say. "I want to know what happens next in this story we're writing." Ava looked at him for a long moment, her eyes soft and serious. "That doesn't sound crazy at all. That sounds like the sanest thing I've heard all day." They sat in comfortable silence, drinking their coffee, letting the jazz wash over them. Outside their cozy corner, the airport hummed with its constant rhythm of arrivals and departures. But in here, time seemed to move differently. Or maybe it had stopped altogether, giving them space to exist in this moment that felt increasingly like the beginning of something extraordinary. "You still have my hand," Ava said softly. "Do you want it back?" She smiled, that perfect dimple appearing, not even a little bit. And there, in a forgotten corner of Terminal A, surrounded by the ghosts of aviation's golden age and the sweet promise of possibility, Jason Miller realized he was no longer just missing a flight. He was finding his way home. The walk back through the airport felt different. Maybe it was the late hour, or the lingering warmth of Rose's coffee, or the way their hands kept finding each other in the quiet of the empty terminals. Whatever it was, the air between them had changed, charged with unspoken words and possibilities. They found themselves in a secluded waiting area near Gate B14, where the large windows offered a panoramic view of the illuminated runways. Maintenance. Vehicles moved like fireflies across the tarmac, their yellow lights blinking in the darkness. "I should check my messages," Jason said, though he made no move to reach for his phone. "The London office has probably sent through the updated schedule for tomorrow's meeting." "The meeting you're not going to make?" Ava's voice was gentle, but the question hung heavy between them. "Right, that one." He ran a hand through his hair, his carefully styled look long since abandoned. "God, what am I doing?" "Having a crisis of corporate faith," Ava suggested, bumping his shoulder playfully. "Or maybe just living for once?" "Both?" He turned to face her. "You know what's strange? I can't seem to care about missing that meeting. anymore. It's like everything that seemed so important this morning just doesn't. Yeah. They found a row of seats facing the window, settling into the uncomfortable airport chairs that had somehow become familiar over the past hours. A cleaning crew passed by, their vacuum humming distantly. "Tell me something, Jason Miller," Ava said, drawing her legs up under her. "If you weren't on track to be the youngest global marketing director in your firm's history, what would you be? Besides unemployed and disappointing my father. I'm serious." She turned to face him fully. "When you were a kid, before spreadsheets and ROI became your love language, what did you dream about?" Jason was quiet for a moment, watching a plane taxi slowly across the distant runway. "I wanted to write. Not business reports or market analyses, but real stories. I used to fill notebooks with these elaborate adventures." He laughed softly. "My mom kept them all, even after I switched my major from creative writing to business administration." What changed? Reality? Practicality? My father's very convincing PowerPoint presentation on the average income of writers versus business executives. And now? Now. He met her eyes. "Now I'm sitting in an airport with a woman who makes me want to burn every PowerPoint I've ever made." Ava's breath caught slightly. "That's a lot of PowerPoints." "Worth it." The tension between them crackled, electric and immediate. Ava shifted closer, and Jason could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, could smell that subtle, spicy scent that had been driving him crazy all night. "Jason," she whispered, "I think you should kiss me now." He didn't need to be told twice. Leaning in, he captured her lips with his, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The kiss was everything, soft and fierce, gentle and demanding, as if they were trying to pour hours of conversation and connection into a single moment. Ava's hands found their way to his hair, and he pulled her closer, forgetting they were in an airport, forgetting everything except the feel of her against him and the way his heart was racing. And Ava pulled back suddenly, her hands still tangled in his hair. "Wait. What's wrong?" "This." She gestured between them, her eyes troubled. "Us. This whole beautiful disaster we're creating." "Beautiful disaster sounds about right," he tried to joke, but his smile faded when he saw her expression. "You're getting on a plane to London tomorrow." "I don't have to." "Yes, you do." She untangled herself from him, putting a small but significant distance between them. "You have a life, a career, a path you've spent years building, and She took a shaky breath. "I'm about to burn down my entire academic career to start a print magazine in the digital age. We're both at these incredible crossroads, and as much as this feels like..." "Like what?" "Like everything," she whispered. "It's just one night in an airport. One beautiful, impossible night that we'll both look back on and wonder if we dreamed it. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it?" She stood up, pacing in front of the window. "Tell me, what's your plan? Skip your career-making meeting? Throw away 8 years of work and what? Help me run a magazine? And I'm supposed to believe you won't wake up in a month regretting every impulsive decision you made because a woman in an airport made you feel alive for one night?" Jason stood too, reaching for her, but she stepped back. "Ava, no, listen, I've spent my whole life playing it safe, being what everyone expected me to be. This magazine, it's the first truly brave thing I've ever done, and I need to do it on my own terms, without wondering if I'm just running away with a handsome stranger because he makes me feel like anything is possible. What if I want to be part of that possibility? What if you just think you do?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "What if this is just your version of my running away from Chicago?" An announcement echoed through the terminal. Another arrival, another departure. The mundane rhythm of airport life continued around them, oblivious to the way their private world was splintering. "So that's it?" Jason's voice was rough. We just, what, go our separate ways and pretend this never happened? No. Ava stepped forward, touching his cheek softly. We treasure it for what it is, a perfect moment in time when two people who needed to wake up found each other in the middle of the night and remembered how to feel something real. That's not enough. Maybe. That's why it has to be all there is. She smiled sadly, that dimple appearing one last time. Sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones that end before we're ready to let them go. Jason wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that they could figure this out, that something this real deserved a chance, but he saw the resolve in her eyes, the strength it was taking her to step back, and he knew she was right. They were both standing at crossroads, both about to make decisions that would change their lives forever, and maybe, just maybe, they needed to face those moments alone, before they could ever hope to face them together. Ava Brooks, he said softly, you are going to create the most incredible magazine the world has ever seen. A tear slipped down her cheek, but her smile was genuine. And you, Jason Miller, are going to remember how to write stories that have nothing to do with market penetration. They stood there, the weight of everything said and unsaid hanging between them, while, beyond the windows, planes continued their eternal dance of goodbye and hello, ending and beginning all at once. The airport seemed colder now. Jason wandered through Terminal C, his footsteps echoing in the near-empty corridor. He'd left Ava at Gate B14, their goodbye as raw as it was civilized. Now, at 2 a.m., the reality of returning to his normal life felt like trying to squeeze back into clothes he'd outgrown. His phone buzzed. Another email from London. He should read it, should start damage control, should. His life had always been a series of shoulds. Until tonight. Instead of checking the email, he found himself opening a notes app and typing, "The thing about airports is that they're full of people running to catch flights, running from past lives, running toward futures they've carefully planned. But sometimes, in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, you stop running long enough to realize you've been going in the wrong direction all along." He stared at the words on his screen. They weren't perfect, weren't polished, weren't formatted, in corporate-approved Calibri font, but they were true. For the first time in years, he was writing something real. Ava sat in the coffee nook, nursing her third cup of roses sweet enough to make your teeth ache, special. She'd opened her laptop, determined to work on the magazine's launch plan, but the cursor blinked accusingly at her on the empty document. "You look like you could use something stronger than coffee," Rose said, sliding into the chair across from her. The older woman's eyes were kind but knowing. "Got any whiskey hidden behind that counter?" "Better. I've got perspective." Rose folded, her hands on the table. "Want to know what I see when I look at you right now? Someone making the responsible choice. Someone making the safe choice. And honey, there's a difference." Ava closed her laptop. "It's not that simple." "It never is. That's what makes it worth doing." Rose pulled something from her apron pocket, a worn, leather-bound notebook. "My Henry gave me this on our second date. Said anyone who could make him miss a flight deserved to have her stories written down. What happened to him? 30 wonderful years, 2 kids, and a lifetime of adventures." Rose's eyes misted slightly. "He passed 5 years ago. You know what he said to me at the end? 'Rosie, thank God for that blizzard in Denver.'" Ava traced the coffee ring on the table. "That's beautiful, but nothing. You think starting that magazine of yours is brave? Real bravery is letting yourself need someone else while you do it." Jason found himself back at the international terminal, staring at the departure board. His flight to London glowed in harsh LED, on time. Everything was arranged, organized, predictable. everything except the hollow feeling in his chest. He pulled out his phone again. She had a way of looking at you that made all your carefully constructed walls feel like paper in the rain. One look, and you'd find yourself telling her things you'd never admitted even to yourself. One smile. God. That smile with the single dimple that appeared like a cosmic reward for making her laugh. And suddenly your whole world shifted 2 degrees to the left, just enough to make you see everything differently. Sir, a cleaning lady approached, pushing her cart. You okay? He realized he'd been standing there for who knows how long, staring at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. I'm fine, he said automatically. Then, actually no, I'm not fine at all. I think I'm making a huge mistake. The woman, her name tag read Gloria, gave him a sympathetic look. Woman trouble? Life trouble. Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly see everything clearly, but that clarity terrifies you? Gloria leaned on her cart. 8 years ago, I was supposed to move to Miami, had a job lined up, apartment deposit paid. Then I met Robert at church. 3 days before my move, I gave up everything to stay. My mama called me crazy. You? Been married 6 years now, got 2 beautiful kids. She smiled. Sometimes crazy is just another word for brave. Ava walked through Terminal D, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder. She should find a quiet corner, work on her magazine, focus on the future she'd chosen. Instead, she found herself composing an email to her Northwestern contact. Dear Dr. Richardson, I need to be honest about why I'm not in Chicago. The truth is, I've been living someone else's version of success. She stopped, deleted it, started again. The thing about academic papers is that we spend so much time analyzing other people's stories, we sometimes forget to live our own. Tonight, in an airport of all places, I remembered what it feels like to be part of a story worth telling. Delete. Again. I met someone who made me question everything, and isn't that what literature is supposed to do? Make us question, make us feel, make us brave enough to... Flight 2876 to Chicago, now boarding at gate D23. The announcement cut through her thoughts. Her rebooked flight, the responsible choice, the safe choice. She looked down at her laptop. Bag, where a copy of Jazz peeked out. Toni Morrison's words echoed in her mind. The function of freedom is to free someone else. What if the bravest thing wasn't running away from Chicago or starting the magazine? What if the bravest thing was admitting that sometimes the best stories are the ones we don't plan? Jason sat in the same spot where he'd first seen Ava reading Morrison. Had it really been less than 24 hours ago? He pulled out his phone one more time. The worst part about making the responsible choice is that responsibility doesn't fill the spaces left behind by the roads not taken. It doesn't quiet the voice in your head that whispers, "What if?" It doesn't stop you from wondering if somewhere, in another terminal, someone else is, sitting alone, writing about the story that could have been. His finger hovered over the delete button. This wasn't his world, words and emotions and raw truths. His world was metrics and projections and... Still writing? His heart stopped, then started again. He looked up to find Ava standing there, her eyes bright with something that looked like certainty. I thought you were leaving, he managed. I was. I am. I just... She took a deep breath. I needed to tell you something first. What? You make me want to write a different kind of story. You make me want to write a different kind of story. The words hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Jason stood slowly, his phone slipping forgotten into his pocket. What kind of story? His voice was rough with hope. The kind that scares me. Ava took a step closer. The kind where the characters don't take the safe route, where they don't Let fear of the unknown stop them from choosing something real. Sounds risky, terrifying. Another step. But you know what's even scarier? Walking away from this and spending the rest of my life wondering, what if? They were close now. Close enough that Jason could see the slight tremor in her hands, the vulnerability beneath her determined expression. I was just writing about you, he said softly. Yeah? Yeah, apparently I can't stop. He laughed quietly. I've written more in the last hour than I have in the past 8 years. Let me see. He pulled out his phone, hesitated. It's not polished, it's just raw. Her eyes sparkled. Good. Raw is exactly what we need right now. Jason handed her the phone, watching as she read his unfiltered thoughts, his clumsy attempts to capture what she meant to him. Her expression softened with each line. Jason Miller, she said finally, looking up at him, you've been holding out on me. This is beautiful. It's honest. You make me want to be honest. Then be honest with me now. She handed back his phone. What do you want? Everything. The word came out before he could second-guess it. I want to skip London. I want to help you build your magazine. I want to write stories that matter. He took a breath. I want to find out if this thing between us is as real as it feels. And what if it's not? What if we crash and burn? Then at least we'll have one hell of a story to tell. Ava's laugh was watery. You know what I was doing? Writing and rewriting an email to Northwestern, trying to explain why their safe tenure-track future isn't enough anymore. Trying to find the words to say that one night in an airport made me brave enough to want more. And did you find them? No, she smiled. But I found you instead. Jason reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. So, what's our next chapter? Well, Ava leaned into his touch. I have a meeting with my printer in Atlanta tomorrow, actually today, and I could use someone with business expertise to look over the contracts, someone who understands ROI, but also believes in the power of raw, messy truth. Sounds like a very specific job description. I wrote it with someone in mind. And after that? After that, she took his hand, intertwining their fingers. After that, we write it together, page by page, story by story. No 5-year plans, no guaranteed outcomes. Just us, being brave enough to choose each other every day. I'm going to need to call London, Jason said, already reaching for his phone with his free hand. Wait! Ava stopped him. Are you sure? Really sure? Because I need you to understand something. I'm not asking you to save my magazine or fix my life. I can do those things on my own. What I'm asking, what I'm offering, is a partnership, a chance to build something together, both of us stepping into the unknown, both of us choosing to be scared and brave at the same time. Jason looked at their joined hands, then at this extraordinary woman who had walked into his life through a coffee disaster and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. You know what my mom wrote in one of her poems? He said, softly. She wrote, the scariest leaps are the ones that bring us home. I never understood what she meant until right now. Ava's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Your mom sounds wise. She would have loved you. He squeezed her hand, almost as much as I'm starting to. The words should have felt too big, too soon. But in the quiet of the terminal, with the first hints of dawn starting to paint the sky outside, they felt exactly right. So, Ava said, her dimple making an appearance, what do we do now? Now? Jason pulled her closer. Now I think I need to properly kiss the woman who's about to help me blow up my entire life plan. Sounds dramatic. Would you expect anything less? We met because I got attacked by coffee and missed a flight. Our whole story is dramatic. Speaking of coffee, Ava glanced toward Terminal A. I know a place that's open 24 hours. And I have a feeling Rose would want to hear about this plot twist. Lead the way, Professor Brooks. Still not there yet, Mr. Miller. They walked hand in hand through the quiet terminal, their footsteps echoing in perfect sync. Outside, planes continued their choreographed dance of departure and arrival, but for the first time in his life, Jason wasn't watching the schedule. He was too busy starting a new story. The coffee nook looked different in the pre-dawn light, warmer somehow, as if the vintage shop was welcoming them back with open arms. Rose looked up from her crossword puzzle, a knowing smile spreading across her face as Jason and Ava walked in, hands still intertwined. "Well, well," she said, already reaching for their mugs. "Looks like someone decided to rewrite their flight plan." "More like tear it up completely," Jason admitted, settling into what he already thought of as their corner table. "Those are the best kind of stories." Rose brought over their coffees, dark for him, sweet for Ava, and this time she'd added a plate of homemade chocolate chip cookies. On the house. Consider it a celebration of good choices. As Rose returned to her counter, Ava pulled out her laptop. "Okay, Mr. Former Corporate Hotshot, ready to see what you're getting yourself into?" "Former?" Jason raised an eyebrow. "I haven't actually quit yet." "No?" Ava's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Having second thoughts?" "Not about us." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Just thinking about how to do this right. I owe my team better than disappearing in the middle of a major project." Ava's expression softened. "See, this is why I need you. I was ready to burn everything down and salt the earth. You're thinking about responsible transitions. Well, one of us has to keep our dramatic tendencies in check," says the man who got taken down by a 6-year-old figure skater. They shared a laugh, the kind that felt both new and familiar, like they'd been doing this forever and were just getting started all at once. "Show me the magazine plans," Jason said, pulling his chair around to her side of the table. Ava opened a series of documents, business plans, writer agreements, mock-ups of layouts. Her passion was evident in every detail, from the carefully curated contributor list to the hand-drawn concept sketches for the first issue's cover. "I'm thinking of calling the first issue Terminal Velocity," she said, pulling up a draft editorial. "About moments that change everything, stories of people choosing to jump without knowing where they'll land." "Wonder where you got that inspiration," Jason murmured, reading over her shoulder. The editorial was beautiful, raw and honest, and full of the kind of truth that made his corporate reports feel like empty calories in comparison. "I may have had a life-changing experience recently," she teased. Then, more seriously, "But it's not just about us. It's about all the stories that get lost in the algorithms, the voices that get drowned out by viral trends and SEO requirements." "It's beautiful, Ava." He meant it. Every page showed not just talent but purpose, a clear vision of what storytelling could be. "But can I make a suggestion? Already starting with the business advice." "Actually, no. Well, yes, I have about 12 thoughts about your distribution model, but that's not what I meant." He pulled out his phone, opening his notes. "I think you should add this." Ava read his airport writings, her expression growing tender. "You want to publish this? Not just this. I want to write a column about transformation, about choosing the scarier path, about—" he gestured between them, "about what happens when you let yourself feel something real." "Jason Miller, are you proposing to be our first regular contributor?" "I'm proposing to be whatever you need me to be. Business partner, writer, coffee runner, though maybe we should hire someone else for that last one, given my track record." Ava's laugh turned into something softer as she looked at him. "You're really serious about this, aren't you? About us? About the magazine? About finally doing something that matters?" He tucked a curl behind her ear. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." The moment was interrupted by Jason's phone buzzing, his boss's name flashing on the screen. Reality calling. "Take it," Ava said. "Time to start that responsible transition." Jason stood, walking a few steps away for privacy, but not before squeezing her hand. Ava watched as he straightened his shoulders, his voice taking on a professional tone that somehow sounded different now, less like armor and more like a tool he was choosing to use. "Richard, yes. About tomorrow's presentation." He paused, listening. "Actually, we need to talk about some changes." While Jason handled his call, Ava opened a new document and began to write. Sometimes courage wears a coffee-stained suit. Sometimes love speaks in business metaphors and writes its feelings in a notes app at 2 a.m. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that our carefully plotted course was leading us away from everything that matters. "Well," she looked up to find Jason standing over her, phone call finished. "I have 2 weeks to transition my projects." He sat back down beside her. Richard wasn't happy, but he understood. Sort of. I think his exact words were, "We all have our midlife crises. Just try not to burn too many bridges." Is that what this is? A crisis? No. Jason's voice was firm. "This is the first clear-headed decision I've made in years." He looked at her laptop screen. "What are you writing?" "The story of how I found my business partner." She smiled. "Though I might leave out the part where he got assaulted by a beverage. Don't want to damage your credibility too much." "Speaking of business partners," Jason pulled out his own laptop. "While you were writing, I made some notes about potential funding sources. There are several literary grants we could apply. Plus, I have some contacts in independent publishing who—" "Jason," Ava put her hand over his screen. "Breathe. We have time." "Right, sorry, old habits." "Don't be sorry, just be here, with me, in this moment." Outside, the coffee nooks, windows, the sky was lightening, painting the airport in shades of promise. Rose hummed along to her radio, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with possibility, and somewhere above them, planes carried people toward their own stories of chance and change. "Hey," Ava said softly, making Jason look up from his laptop. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making me brave enough to want everything." Jason closed his laptop, turning to face her fully. "Thank you for making me brave enough to choose it." As the sun rose over Atlanta International Airport, 2 people who had arrived as strangers sat surrounded by business plans and story drafts, coffee cups and dreams, building something new in the space between what was and what could be. Their next chapter was just beginning. 6 months later, Terminal A of Atlanta International Airport hummed with its usual controlled chaos. But today, a small crowd gathered in the coffee nook, transforming the vintage shop into something between a literary salon and a celebration. Rose had outdone herself, laying out homemade pastries alongside her signature coffee, while fairy lights twinkled among the old aviation photos. In the center of it all stood Ava Brooks, holding the first printed copy of Raw Notes magazine. The cover was everything she'd dreamed, simple, elegant, with an illustration of an airport terminal where all the gates led to handwritten stories. The title, Terminal Velocity, Stories of Beautiful Disasters, gleamed in copper foil. "I can't believe you actually used that title," Jason said, appearing at her side with 2 coffee cups, both safely lidded this time. "Well, it did test well with our focus group." Ava smiled, accepting her cup. "Though I suspect Rose might have been biased." "I heard that," Rose called from behind the counter, "and I'll have you know my opinion is worth at least 10 regular readers." The shop had filled with an eclectic mix of people. Writers featured in the first issue, local journalists, independent bookstore owners, and even a few curious travelers who'd been drawn in by the energy. In one corner, a young poet was earnestly discussing line breaks with a retired pilot who'd contributed a piece about night flights and loneliness. "Have you read it yet?" Ava asked softly, nodding toward the magazine. "You mean my column?" Jason straightened his tie. "No coffee stains today. Only about 17 times. I still can't believe you put it first." "The art of missing your flight is the heart of this whole issue." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, your story about corporate redemption through accidental caffeine assault tested incredibly well with our beta readers." "Funny. I thought so." She handed him her coffee so she could open the magazine. "Sometimes the best stories start with a mistake," she read from his column. "Sometimes you have to fall, literally, spectacularly, coffee-soaked suit fall, before you can look up and see where you're really meant to be going. You're going to quote me to myself? I'm going to quote you to everyone." She gestured to where Richard, Jason's former boss, was surprisingly engaged in conversation with one of their contributing writers. "I think even the corporate world is starting to see the value of raw truth." It hadn't been easy these past 6 months. There had been late nights of editing, tense discussions about budgets, moments when they both questioned whether they were crazy to think this could work. But then someone would send in a story that made them both cry, or Jason would come up with a brilliant solution to a distribution problem, or Ava would find the perfect words to capture what they were trying to build, and everything would click back into place. "You know what today is?" Jason asked, taking back his coffee. "Launch day?" "Besides that." Ava's eyes softened. 6 months since a certain someone missed his flight. "Best mistake I ever made." He nodded toward the window where planes took off into the evening sky, though technically I didn't miss anything. I just found a better destination. Smooth, Miller. Very smooth. I try. He set down his coffee and pulled her close. "You know, I never did make it to London." "Regrets?" "Only that I didn't spill coffee on myself sooner." Their laughter was interrupted by Rose tapping a spoon against a coffee cup. "All right, everyone, time for the official first reading. Ava, honey, you're up." Ava squeezed Jason's hand once more before stepping to the front of the shop. She looked radiant, confident, in a way that had nothing to do with academic credentials or corporate approval. This was Ava Brooks in her element, surrounded by truth-tellers and story lovers, building something real. "Thank you all for being here," she began. 6 months ago, this magazine was just a dream. Actually, it wasn't even that. It was an escape plan, a way to run from a life that didn't fit anymore. But then something happened. I met someone who reminded me that sometimes running away and running toward look exactly the same from the outside. What matters is what you're choosing to carry with you. She opened the magazine to the editor's letter. "So this first issue is dedicated to all the beautiful disasters that lead us home, to the missed flights and spilled coffees, to the moments when we're brave enough to let go of our carefully planned routes and trust that something better is waiting, to the stories that don't fit into algorithms but nest perfectly in human hearts." Jason watched her read, remembering that first moment in the terminal, her curled up with Morrison, challenging him with that knowing smile. He thought about all the emails he used to send, all the presentations he used to give, and realized he'd never said anything as true as what he wrote in those midnight airport notes. After the reading, after the applause and the congratulations, after Rose had pressed leftover pastries into their hands, for later, Ava and Jason found themselves back at their corner table. "So," he said, "ready to start work on issue 2? "Already? We just launched issue 1. What can I say? Your business partner is very efficiency-minded." Is that what you are? My business partner?" Jason pulled her closer. I think I'm whatever story we want to write next. Through the window, the airport's runway lights blinked their eternal pattern of welcome and farewell. But here, in their coffee shop sanctuary, surrounded by the ghosts of countless travelers and the promise of countless stories yet to be told, Ava and Jason had found something rare, a permanent connection in a place designed for temporary passages. "You know what?" Ava said, looking around at their unlikely literary salon in Terminal A. "I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be." And she was right. Sometimes home isn't a place you fly to. Sometimes it's the story you choose to write, the person you choose to write it with, and the courage to let that story be as messy and beautiful and real as it needs to be. Sometimes home is a coffee shop in an airport where two people who were meant to be somewhere else found exactly where they belonged. Together. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.
The sound of shattering glass echoed through the penthouse suite of the Alexander Industries Tower. Blake Alexander, 34-year-old tech mogul and Boston's most eligible bachelor, stared in disbelief at the champagne flute fragments scattered across his imported Italian marble floor. She said no. Blake's voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking the words any louder might make them more real. His assistant, Marcus, shifted uncomfortably by the door. "Yes, sir. Ms. Collins declined your dinner invitation." Her exact words were, "Tell Mr. Alexander I'm not interested in becoming another notch on his designer belt." Blake ran his fingers through his dark, meticulously styled hair. This was unprecedented. Women didn't say no to Blake Alexander. They certainly didn't send back his custom-made invitations delivered with rare blue orchids flown in from Thailand. He owned half of Boston's skyline, for God's sake. "Did you tell her who I am?" Blake demanded, his steel blue eyes narrowing. Marcus adjusted his glasses nervously. She knew exactly who you were, sir. That seemed to be part of the problem." Blake paced the floor, carefully avoiding the glass shards. His reflection bounced off the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the glittering Boston skyline, a kingdom he had built from nothing. A kingdom that apparently held no sway over one Emma Collins, head librarian at the Boston Public Library. "Find out everything about her," Blake ordered, straightening his bespoke suit jacket. "And I mean everything. What she likes, what she hates, her favorite food, books, music." "Sir," Marcus interrupted gently, "maybe the issue is precisely that approach. Your reputation precedes you." Blake stopped pacing. His string of high-profile flings was well documented by the tabloids. The billionaire Casanova, they called him. Last month's charity gala photo of him with twin supermodels still dominated the gossip sites. "I just want dinner with her, Marcus," Blake insisted, though he wasn't entirely sure why this particular rejection stung so much. He had glimpsed Emma only once, during a library fundraiser he'd reluctantly attended. She had been passionately arguing about the importance of physical books in a digital age, completely unaware of who he was, or how much power he wielded in the room. Her complete indifference had been intriguing. Perhaps a less ostentatious approach, Marcus suggested. Blake's phone buzzed. Another crisis at the company needed his attention. Always another crisis. Always another deal. Always another conquest. But for the first time in years, Blake Alexander felt something different stirring. A challenge. "Cancel my meetings tomorrow morning," he said suddenly. "I think it's time I visited the library." What Blake didn't know was that Emma Collins had her own complicated reasons for avoiding men like him, and that his appearance in her carefully ordered world was about to set in motion a chain of events neither of them could have anticipated. As his private elevator descended, Blake smiled to himself. He'd never had to work for a woman's attention before, but then again, he hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by backing down from a challenge. The Boston Public Library's main reading room was bathed in golden morning light as Emma Collins shelved returned books with practiced efficiency. At 32, she found peace in the ordered world of the library that had eluded her in other aspects of life. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her glasses occasionally sliding down her nose as she worked. "Emma, there's someone asking for you at the reference desk," her colleague Olivia whispered, approaching with wide eyes. "And well, you should just come see." Emma frowned. "I'm almost done here. Trust me," Olivia insisted. "You want to handle this one personally." Sighing, Emma followed Olivia to the front where she stopped dead in her tracks. Standing at the reference desk, dressed in a casual button-down that probably cost more than her monthly rent, was Blake Alexander. In person, he was even more striking than in his magazine covers, tall with an easy confidence that radiated power. Several patrons were openly staring. "Ms. Collins," he said with a smile that had charmed countless women across continents. "I'm looking for a book recommendation." Emma's expression remained neutral despite her racing pulse. "What sort of books do you enjoy, Mr. Alexander?" "I'm not sure. That's why I need a librarian's expertise." He leaned against the counter. "What would you recommend to someone who's used to getting everything he wants?" "The self-help section is on the second floor," Emma replied coolly. "Specifically, books on handling rejection." A woman nearby stifled a laugh. Blake's smile faltered momentarily before returning with renewed interest. "Actually, I'm genuinely looking for something to read." His voice softened. "Contrary to what the tabloids suggest, I do read books that aren't quarterly reports." Emma studied him, trying to determine if this was another elaborate attempt to add her to his collection of conquests. "Follow me," she finally said, leading him toward the fiction section. "Why did you turn down my dinner invitation?" Blake asked once they were between the shelves, away from curious eyes. "Because I'm not interested in being photographed on your arm, dissected by gossip columns, then discarded when someone more exciting comes along," Emma stated matter-of-factly, pulling a book from the shelf. "Here, Pride and Prejudice. It might teach you something about first impressions." "I've read it," Blake replied, surprising her. Darcy was misunderstood. "Darcy had to earn Elizabeth's respect," Emma countered. "Is that what I need to do? Earn your respect?" Blake's blue eyes held a challenge. Emma pushed her glasses up. "Mr. Alexander." "Blake." "Mr. Alexander," she insisted. "I appreciate the theater of the humble billionaire visiting a public library, but we both know tomorrow you'll be back to your real life." "You don't know anything about my real life," he said, a hint of genuine frustration in his voice. "I know enough," Emma replied, thinking of her sister Katie's heartbreak after being dumped by a man cut from the same cloth as Blake. "Now, if there's nothing else, have dinner with me," Blake said, but this time it wasn't a command. No private jets, no expensive wine, no pressure, just dinner. "Why?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. "There are literally models and actresses lining up for your attention." Blake considered his answer carefully. "Because when I donated to the library fundraiser last month, you were the only person who didn't care who I was. You argued with me about digital books versus physical ones without once mentioning my net worth. It was refreshing." Emma remembered the conversation but hadn't realized who he was at the time. She'd been rather passionate, perhaps even rude. "One dinner," Blake continued, "at a restaurant of your choosing. If you still think I'm the shallow playboy from the tabloids afterward, I'll never bother you again." Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Katie. "Emergency. Pipe burst in my apartment, everything's flooded, need help." "I have to go," Emma said urgently, shoving the phone back in her pocket. "Family emergency." As she rushed toward the staff room to grab her things, Blake followed. "Let me help. I can have a restoration team there in minutes." "This isn't your problem," Emma insisted. "Consider it my first attempt at earning respect," Blake offered, already pulling out his phone. Emma hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Her sister's apartment was her whole world, and time was of the essence with water damage. "Fine," she conceded reluctantly. "But this doesn't mean I'm having dinner with you." Blake's expression was uncharacteristically sincere. "Understood. Now, what's the address?" The scene at Katie's apartment was worse than Emma had imagined. Water cascaded from the ceiling, the hardwood floors already buckling. Katie stood in the middle of the chaos, frantically trying to save photo albums and books. "Emma, thank God." Katie stopped mid-sentence when she noticed Blake Alexander standing behind her sister. "Why is Blake Alexander in my flooded apartment?" "He offered to help," Emma explained awkwardly. Before Katie could respond, a team of professionals in uniform flooded in, not with water, but with industrial equipment. Blake had made one phone call from the car, and suddenly a full restoration crew was efficiently tackling the disaster. "This is Jackson," Blake introduced a man who appeared to be the team leader. "He'll make sure everything's handled properly." "I should be documenting this for insurance," Katie said, looking overwhelmed. "Already taken care of," Jackson assured her. "We're photographing everything." As the crew worked, Blake rolled up his sleeves, literally, revealing tanned forearms as he moved furniture away from the worst of the flooding. "You don't have to do that," Emma said, surprised. "I'm not completely useless," Blake replied with a half-smile. "Contrary to popular belief, I wasn't always rich." Emma raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "It's true," Blake continued, helping her move a bookshelf. "I grew up in South Boston. My dad was a mechanic. When our basement flooded every spring, there was no team to call, just mops and buckets." Emma studied him, trying to reconcile this image with the playboy billionaire from the magazines. "The articles all say you come from old money." "That's the story my PR team prefers," Blake admitted. "Sounds better than scholarship kid who got lucky with a tech startup." In the kitchen, Katie was frantically trying to save a stack of papers. Blake noticed Emma's concerned expression. "What are those?" he asked quietly. "Her manuscript," Emma explained. "She's a writer. Been working on that novel for 2 years." Blake immediately went to help, carefully separating the damp pages. "We need a hairdryer and some paper towels," he said with surprising expertise. "If we act fast, we might be able to save most of it." For the next hour, Emma watched in amazement as Blake Alexander, who reportedly once bought a yacht on a whim, painstakingly dried each page of her sister's manuscript. There was something unexpectedly gentle in the way his fingers handled the fragile pages. "Why are you really doing this?" Emma finally asked when they had a moment alone. Blake considered the question. "Maybe I'm trying to prove you wrong about me. Or maybe this is just an elaborate strategy to get me to have dinner with you," Emma countered, though with less conviction than before. Blake's phone rang, the third time in 20 minutes. He glanced at it, then silenced it again. "Don't you need to get that?" Emma asked. "Billion-dollar empires don't run themselves. They can manage without me for one afternoon," Blake replied, though Emma noticed the tension in his jaw. Katie approached them, looking shell-shocked but grateful. "The crew says they've stopped the water and can start drying everything out, but..." She trailed off, looking around her saturated apartment. "You'll need somewhere to stay," Emma finished, her thought. "You can stay with me." "Actually," Blake interjected, "I own a building 2 blocks from here with a fully furnished guest apartment. It's empty right now. You're welcome to use it until your place is fixed." Katie's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly..." "It's just sitting there," Blake insisted. "Consider it a loan, not charity." Later, after Katie was settled in the immaculate apartment, which Emma suspected was worth more than most people's primary residences, Blake walked Emma to her car. "Thank you," Emma said sincerely, "for helping my sister." "Does this mean I've earned enough respect for that dinner?" Blake asked, his usual confidence tempered with what seemed like genuine uncertainty. Emma hesitated. The man who had spent the afternoon saving her sister's manuscript didn't align with the tabloid caricature she'd judged so harshly. "One dinner," she conceded. "No private dining rooms, no celebrity chef treatment." "Deal," Blake agreed quickly. "Tomorrow night? I know a place that makes incredible ramen, very public, very casual." "Ramen?" Emma couldn't hide her surprise. "Best comfort food in Boston?" Blake said with unexpected enthusiasm. "Unless you'd prefer somewhere else?" Emma shook her head, intrigued despite herself. "Ramen is fine." As they parted ways, Emma realized with alarm that she was actually looking forward to their date. "No," she corrected herself firmly. "Not a date. A dinner." There was a difference. Blake watched her drive away, realizing he'd just rescheduled a crucial investor meeting for a bowl of noodles with a librarian. Marcus would think he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. The ramen shop was tucked away in a narrow alley off the main street, its weathered wooden sign barely visible beneath the soft glow of paper lanterns. Emma arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from childhood she'd never shaken, and found herself scanning the bustling sidewalk for any sign of Blake. She smoothed down her emerald-wrapped dress, chosen after an embarrassingly long deliberation, for someone who'd insisted this wasn't a real date. When Blake appeared, he was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the power suit and slicked-back hair. Instead, he wore dark jeans, a simple navy Henley that accentuated his broad shoulders, and glasses, actual prescription glasses, that lent him an intellectual air Emma hadn't expected. His usual bodyguard and entourage were conspicuously absent. "You look surprised," Blake said, a hint of vulnerability in his smile as he approached. "Disappointed?" "Just processing," Emma admitted, taking in this transformed version of Boston's most notorious playboy. "I didn't recognize you without your billionaire costume." "That's the idea." Blake's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. "You look beautiful, by the way. Green suits you." A warmth crept up Emma's neck that had nothing to do with the steam rising from the ramen shop's open kitchen. She deflected with practiced ease. "How did you even find this place? It's not exactly on the Billionaire's Guide to Boston." "My college roommate's family owned it. Blake explained as they entered. I used to wash dishes here when I was broke and trying to launch my first startup. Hiro, he called out to an older Japanese man behind the counter who broke into a wide grin at the sight of him. Blake-kun, too long. Hiro abandoned his post to embrace Blake with genuine affection. And with a real date, not those plastic women. From TV. Emma couldn't help but laugh at Blake's embarrassed expression. This wasn't the carefully orchestrated charm she'd expected, but something far more. Appealing. Authenticity. They were led to a corner table intimate without being secluded. The restaurant was packed with an eclectic mix of students, local families, and workers from nearby businesses. Not a single person seemed to recognize the tech magnate in their midst. You come here often? Emma asked, genuinely curious. When I need to remember who I really am, Blake replied, then looked immediately self-conscious. That sounded less cliché in my head. No, I get it. Emma surprised herself with the admission. Sometimes I hide in the rare manuscripts room at the library when everything gets too loud. Just me and 500-year-old books that have survived wars, plagues, and time itself. Makes my problems seem smaller. The conversation flowed with unexpected ease as they ordered. Blake in fluent Japanese that made Emma raise her eyebrows appreciatively. They shared steaming bowls of tonkotsu ramen, the rich broth swimming with tender slices of chashu pork, perfectly jammy eggs, and springy noodles that demanded their full attention. So, Blake said, skillfully maneuvering his chopsticks. What made you become a librarian? Passion for literature or love of silence? Both, Emma confessed. But mostly I believe stories save lives, mine included. She hesitated, then decided to offer a piece of herself. My mom died when I was 12. Dad worked double shifts to keep us afloat. Books became my escape, my comfort, my education on how to be human when everything hurt too much. Blake's expression softened. I'm sorry about your mom. Long time ago, Emma said, though the gentle understanding in his eyes made her throat tighten unexpectedly. What about you? How does a mechanic's son become a tech billionaire before 30? Sheer terror of ending up back where I started, Blake admitted with startling honesty. And insomnia. Turns out you can build an empire when you never sleep. That's not sustainable, Emma observed. Says who? Blake challenged with a half smile. The dark circles under your eyes, Emma replied boldly, and the fact that you've checked your phone 17 times in 45 minutes. Blake looked, genuinely startled, then chagrined. He pulled out his phone and switched it off completely, a gesture that, for someone like him, felt oddly intimate. Tell me about your sister, he said, changing the subject. The writer. Emma's face lit. But Katie's brilliant. Her novel's about a woman who discovers she can see how much time people have left to live. It explores grief, mortality, the value of moments when you know they're finite. She paused. She's been rejected by 32 publishers. But she keeps writing. Every day. Sometimes I think she believes in her stories more than she believes in herself. Something shifted in Blake's expression. I'd like to read it someday. Why? Emma challenged. So you can play literary agent now? No. Blake replied seriously. Because it matters to you. The simple truth of his words hung between them, unexpectedly weighty. Emma searched his face for any sign of the practiced charm she'd been guarding against, but found only earnest attention. Their conversation meandered through books they loved, places they'd traveled, Blake everywhere for business, Emma nowhere but everywhere through pages, and childhood memories both sweet and painful. Time slipped away unnoticed until Hiro began to dim the lights, a gentle hint they were closing. I can't believe it's almost midnight, Emma said, startled. Shall I walk you home? Blake offered, then quickly added, just to your door. No expectations. The night air was crisp as they strolled through Boston's historic streets, their shoulders occasionally brushing. Emma's apartment was only 15 minutes away, but they took their time, neither quite ready for the evening to end. You haven't asked about my business once, Blake observed. Should I have? Emma replied. Everyone does. It's usually all they want to talk about. I'm more interested in the person than the portfolio, Emma said simply. They reached her brownstone apartment building, pausing at the bottom of the steps. The moment stretched between them, electric with possibility. I had a nice time, Emma admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Nice enough to do it again? Blake asked, his usual confidence replaced by something more tentative. Before Emma could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at it, frowning. It's Katie. She never calls this late. The moment she answered, Katie's panicked voice came through. Emma, turn on the news. Channel 7. Blake watched Emma's expression transform from confusion to horror as she fumbled with her keys, rushing inside. He followed, concern overriding propriety, as Emma turned on her small television. There on the screen was Blake's face next to hers, captured leaving the ramen shop. The headline scrolled beneath, Billionaire Blake Alexander's New Conquest Mystery Woman Unveiled. Emma stared at the television in horror. The reporter's voice droned on about Blake's notorious dating history and speculated about his latest fling with the unassuming librarian. They had footage of them walking, laughing, and even a moment when Blake had gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that had seemed private and tender in the moment, now dissected for entertainment. I have to go, Blake said, immediately pulling out his phone. I'll fix this. Fix this? Emma echoed, her voice hollow. How exactly do you fix a national news story? I have a PR team, Emma. This isn't the first time. That's exactly the problem. Emma cut him off, wrapping her arms around herself. This isn't the first time for you. This is your world. But it's not mine. She glanced back at the screen where they were now showing photos of his previous relationships. All stunning models and actresses. I don't belong in that lineup. Blake's expression turned serious. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Emma challenged, a mixture of embarrassment and anger rising within her. One dinner, and I'm already the punchline to Boston's favorite soap opera. Emma, please. Her phone began buzzing incessantly. Messages from co-workers, distant friends, even her father who rarely texted. A particularly awful thought struck her. Oh God, the library board, if they see this, they can't fire you for having dinner with someone, Blake argued. You don't understand, Emma's voice cracked. I'm up for the director position. The why? Board votes next week. They're all about maintaining the library's dignified image. She scrolled through her notifications with growing dread. And now I'm Billionaire's bookish booty call on TMZ. Blake ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Let me make some calls. I can have this contained by morning. Contained? Emma's laugh was bitter. My life isn't one of your PR problems to manage, Blake. This is exactly why I said no in the first place. The hurt in his eyes was unmistakable, but Emma was too overwhelmed to care. Her carefully constructed world was unraveling on primetime television. I think you should go, she said quietly. Emma, please, she insisted, opening her door. I need space to figure out how to deal with this. Reluctantly, Blake moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, tonight was real. For me, more real than anything has been in a long time. After he left, Emma sank onto her couch, phone still buzzing relentlessly. She turned it off completely but couldn't escape the thoughts racing through her mind. Tonight had been perfect. Until reality intruded. Blake's reality. A world where privacy was a luxury he hadn't enjoyed in years. The next morning brought no relief. Emma trudged to work, hood pulled up, sunglasses on despite the cloudy day. She'd barely reached her office when Olivia burst in, tablet in hand. Have you seen the latest? Olivia asked breathlessly. Blake Alexander just gave an impromptu press conference. Emma's stomach dropped. What? On the tablet screen, Blake stood outside his corporate headquarters, looking impeccably dressed, yet somehow exhausted. His voice was firm as he addressed the gathered reporters. My personal life is not public entertainment, he stated. The woman you've been speculating about is a private citizen who deserves respect. Our relationship is exactly no one's business but our own, and I expect all coverage to cease immediately." A reporter shouted, "Are you confirming you're dating the librarian?" Blake's jaw tightened. "I'm confirming that I value my privacy, and more importantly, hers. This ends now." The video cut to a news anchor. In an unprecedented move, Alexander Industries has threatened legal action against any outlet continuing to publish stories about Blake Alexander's personal relationships, citing privacy laws. Tech industry insiders are speculating this may impact Alexander's upcoming merger talks with. Emma switched off the tablet, her mind reeling. Had Blake just put his business interests at risk for her privacy? Olivia was practically vibrating with excitement. "So it's true? You and Blake Alexander?" "It was one dinner," Emma muttered, slumping into her chair. "One dinner that has the most eligible bachelor in Boston threatening media outlets," Olivia pointed out. "That's not nothing." Before Emma could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Collins, this is Marcus, Mr. Alexander's assistant. He would like to speak with you if you're willing. Please call at your convenience." Attached was a private number. Emma stared at the message, conflicted. Part of her wanted to delete it and pretend the whole whirlwind had never happened. But another part couldn't forget the genuine connection they'd shared over steaming bowls of ramen, or how he'd dried her sister's manuscript page by page. Her office phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Mrs. Harrington, head of the library board. "Emma, dear." The older woman's voice crackled through the line. "The board would like to see you. Now, if possible." Heart sinking, Emma made her way to the boardroom. This was it. The end of her professional aspirations, all because of one dinner. To her surprise, the entire board was present, faces unreadable. Mrs. Harrington gestured for her to sit. "Emma, we've received a rather unusual call this morning," Mrs. Harrington began. "From the mayor's office." Emma blinked. "The mayor?" "Yes. It seems Blake Alexander has offered to triple the library's annual funding, establish a new wing for rare manuscripts, and create a literacy foundation in partnership with us." Mrs. Harrington leaned forward. "Contingent on one condition." "What condition?" Emma asked, though she already suspected. "That we judge the director candidate on her merits alone, without regard to her personal associations." Emma felt a flush of anger. Of course, Blake was trying to buy her way out of trouble, just throwing money at the problem like he did with everything else. "I see," Emma said stiffly. "And what did the board say?" "We said Mr. Alexander's generous offer was appreciated but unnecessary," Mrs. Harrington stated firmly. "We've always intended to judge you on your merits alone, my dear. Though the additional funding is certainly welcome, it doesn't influence our decision. And," added Mr. Peterson, the youngest board member, "we agreed his condition was reasonable. Your private life is your own business." Relief washed over Emma, quickly followed by confusion. Blake had offered the library millions, not to secure her job, but simply to ensure she was judged fairly. As she left the meeting, Emma's phone buzzed again with another text from Marcus. "Mr. Alexander wanted me to clarify he expects nothing in return for his library donation. It was something he'd been considering since the fundraiser last month. Your career and reputation should never suffer because of your association with him." Emma stopped in the middle of the hallway, torn between gratitude and frustration. Blake was making grand gestures, throwing his influence around, but was it to help her, or to ease his own conscience? And why did part of her wish he would just show up himself instead of sending texts through his assistant? As if in answer to her unspoken question, the library's front doors opened, and Blake Alexander walked in, looking decidedly un-billionaire-like, in jeans and a worn MIT sweatshirt. He carried 2 cups of coffee and wore an expression of uncertainty Emma had never seen in any of his magazine covers. Their eyes met across the lobby, and everything else seemed to fade away. The library atrium fell silent as Blake approached Emma, the morning sunlight streaming through the skylights, casting a spotlight on their unexpected reunion. Patrons and staff alike tried to pretend they weren't watching Boston's most famous billionaire nervously holding 2 coffee cups. "You're all over the news," Emma said quietly when he reached her. "Not the first time," Blake replied with a wry smile, offering her one of the coffees. "Oat milk latte with cinnamon. Your sister mentioned it was your favorite." Emma accepted the cup, surprised he'd remembered such a detail. "You talked to Katie?" "She called me, actually. Said you were too stubborn to do it yourself." His blue eyes searched hers. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" Emma led him to the rare manuscripts room, her sanctuary. The room smelled of old paper and wood polish, the kind of scent that money couldn't buy. Blake looked around with genuine appreciation at the climate-controlled displays of literary treasures. "I'm sorry," they both said simultaneously, then laughed, breaking the tension. "You go first," Emma offered. Blake set his coffee down on a reading table. "I'm sorry your privacy was invaded because of me. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from that. But I'm not sorry about our dinner or getting to know you." Emma sighed, running her finger along the edge of an ancient manuscript case. "I'm sorry I panicked. It's just, I've spent my whole life being invisible, Blake. Comfortable, in the background. Then suddenly I'm on national TV being dissected by strangers. I understand," Blake said softly. "More than you know." "Do you?" Emma challenged. "Your life has been public for years." "And I hate every second of it," Blake admitted, surprising her. "The real me, the one who reads classics, who misses working with his hands, who just wanted to build something useful, got buried under billionaire Blake years ago." He moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that Emma could see the genuine emotion in his eyes. "Then I met a woman who argued with me about books, who didn't care about my bank account, who called me on my bullshit. And for the first time in years, I felt like myself again." Emma's resolve weakened. "Blake, I canceled the merger," he interjected. Emma blinked, confused. "What merger?" "With Technovate, the deal I've been working on for 2 years." Blake ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "My board thinks I've lost my mind." "Why would you do that?" "Because they were demanding guarantees about my public image. Stable, predictable, marketable." His voice was bitter. "They had concerns about me dating a normal person instead of the approved celebrity types, said it made me look unsophisticated." Emma's eyes widened. "You canceled a billion-dollar deal because of me?" "No," Blake corrected firmly. "I canceled it because of me. Because I'm tired of letting other people dictate who I can be." He took a deep breath. "But I'd be lying if I said you weren't part of it. You reminded me there's more to life than acquisitions and stock prices." A silence fell between them, heavy with possibility. "The board offered me the director position," Emma said finally. Blake's face lit up. "Emma, that's wonderful." "I haven't accepted yet," she continued. "I needed to talk to you first." "To me? Why?" Emma set her coffee down and met his gaze squarely. "Because if I take it, I need to know if this," she gestured between them, "is something real. Something worth the risk." Blake's expression softened. "Ask me." "Ask you what?" "Whatever you need to know to make your decision." Emma took a deep breath. "If we tried this, really tried, what happens when the novelty wears off? When I'm just Emma the librarian and the challenge is gone?" "The challenge was never the point," Blake said simply. "The connection was." "And the media circus? Your shareholders' opinions?" "Let me worry about them." He moved closer. "My question is, are you willing to give this a chance? Not the billionaire and the librarian, just Blake and Emma, 2 people who connected over ramen and books." Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and saw beyond the public persona to the man who had saved her sister's manuscript, who had threatened media outlets to protect her privacy, who stood before her now, vulnerable and hopeful. "It won't be easy," she warned. "Nothing worth having ever is," Blake replied with a smile. "And I won't change who I am." Emma added firmly. No designer makeovers or charity galas every weekend. I wouldn't want you to change, Blake assured her. Your authenticity is what drew me to you in the first place. Emma felt the last of her resistance crumbling. One condition. Name it. We take it slow. Really slow. Blake's smile widened. Does that mean I get a second date? It means, Emma said, stepping closer until they were inches apart, that I'm willing to see where this goes, day by day. Blake reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, just as he had the night before. Only this time, there were no cameras, no audience, just them. I can work with that, he murmured. Their first kiss was nothing like Emma had imagined, not the calculated move of a practiced playboy, but something tentative and sweet, full of promise rather than demand. When they broke apart, both were smiling. So, Blake asked, his forehead resting against hers, what should we do for our second date? Emma laughed. Something normal people do. Mini golf, maybe? I'm terrible at mini golf, Blake confessed. Even better, Emma teased. I'll finally find something you're not good at. I can think of worse ways to spend an evening than being humiliated at mini golf by the new library director, Blake said, his eyes sparkling. Their moment was interrupted by Blake's phone buzzing, his board no doubt still in crisis mode over his canceled merger. At the same time, Emma noticed Mrs. Harrington hovering near the door, clearly waiting to speak with her. Real-life calls. Emma sighed. Let it wait another minute, Blake said, pulling her close again. 6 months later, the tabloids still occasionally featured photos of Boston's most unlikely power couple, the billionaire and the librarian. They captured Blake carrying stacks of books at library fundraisers, Emma reluctantly attending tech conferences, albeit in her own comfortable style, and the two of them regularly eating at a certain hidden ramen shop. What the cameras missed were the quiet moments, Blake reading manuscripts for Katie, who was now working with a publisher, Emma challenging Blake's workaholic tendencies and bringing balance to his life, their Sunday morning ritual of coffee and crosswords in her small apartment, which he preferred to his penthouse. In the end, Emma Collins, who had once been certain that men like Blake Alexander were nothing but trouble, found herself happily proven wrong. And Blake, who had spent years surrounding himself with people who wanted something from him, discovered that what he'd really been searching for was someone who simply wanted him, just him, not the empire he'd built. And that, it turned out, was worth all the risk in the world. The first crack of thunder split the sky like a gunshot, sending a murder of crows erupting from the ancient jacaranda tree that had stood sentinel over the Ribeiro farm for 3 generations. Elena Ribeiro, 17 years old with eyes the color of Brazilian coffee beans, stood frozen in the doorway of her family's weathered farmhouse, clutching a manila envelope that felt heavier than the storm clouds gathering overhead. Elena, minha filha, please understand. Miguel Ribeiro's voice cracked like dry leather, his calloused hands trembling as he reached for his daughter. The man who had once carried 100-pound coffee sacks on his shoulders now couldn't bear the weight of his own shame. "Don't!" Elena's scream tore through the humid afternoon air. "Don't you dare call me your daughter!" She thrust the papers toward him, her hands shaking with rage. "You sold me to Augusto Mantovani, the man they call the Widowmaker." Inside the house, a weak cough echoed from the master bedroom. Elena's fury momentarily wavered as she glanced toward the sound. Her mother, Gabriela, fighting stage 4 lymphoma, with the determination of a woman who had worked the coffee fields since she was 12. Miguel's weathered face crumpled. "The treatments, Elena. Hospital San Lucas wants 500,000 reais up front. Your mother has days, maybe a week. Mantovani," he offered. His voice trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that had condemned his daughter. "My freedom for her life," Elena whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The distant rumble of engines interrupted their confrontation. A convoy of obsidian Mercedes-Benz vehicles materialized through the coffee plants like mechanical predators, their pristine paint jobs an obscene contrast to the red earth that had sustained the Ribeiro family for generations. From the lead vehicle emerged Augusto Mantovani himself, 6 feet of calculated menace wrapped in a Tom Ford suit that cost more than the Ribeiro farm's annual harvest. At 62, his silver hair was immaculately groomed, his face carved from marble and cruelty. 3 wedding rings adorned a chain around his neck, trophies from his previous marriages, all of which had ended in tragedy. "Miss Ribeiro," Mantovani's voice slithered through the humid air like a venomous snake. His pale blue eyes, lifeless as a doll's, appraised her with clinical detachment. "Your photographs didn't do you justice. Though I see you've inherited your mother's fire." He paused, savoring the word. "I do so enjoy taming wild things." Elena straightened her spine, meeting his gaze with defiance that made her father flinch. "I am not a thing to be tamed, Senor Mantovani." A smile played. At the corners of his thin lips, the expression of a cat toying with a mouse. "Not yet, my dear. But in 3 days' time at the Cathedral of São Paulo you will become Mrs. Augusto Mantovani. And then—" He let the threat hang in the air like the approaching storm. "Sir?" Miguel stepped forward, hat in hand. "The money. For my wife's treatment." Without looking away from Elena, Mantovani snapped his fingers. A bodyguard, built like a bull and twice as mean, approached with a briefcase. Inside lay neat stacks of Brazilian reais, more money than the Ribeiros had seen in their lifetime. "Consider it a down payment," Mantovani said smoothly. "The remainder will be transferred after the ceremony, provided, of course, that your daughter proves satisfactory." Elena's stomach churned. She thought of her mother, pale and withering in the bedroom, unaware that her only child was being bartered like livestock at a country fair. She thought of her dreams, university in Rio, studying marine biology, falling in love with someone who saw her as more than a beautiful possession. "I need to say goodbye to my mother," Elena said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Mantovani checked his Patek Philippe watch, a timepiece worth more than most Brazilians earned in a decade. 5 minutes, then we leave for São Paulo. Your new life awaits." Elena rushed to her mother's bedside. Gabriela Ribeiro, once vibrant and strong, now resembled a faded photograph of herself. Her eyes, still sharp despite the morphine, locked onto her daughter's face. "Elena, what's happening? I heard shouting." Elena forced a smile, the greatest performance of her young life. "Nothing, Mai. I'm going to the city for a while. For work. Papa found me a good position." Gabriela's frail hand found Elena's. "You're lying, Mina Pequena. A mother always knows." Tears finally broke through Elena's facade. "I love you, Mai. More than all the stars in the sky. And I love you more than all the coffee beans in Brazil," Gabriela whispered back, their special saying since Elena was small. Outside, Mantovani's driver honked impatiently. Elena kissed her mother's forehead, memorizing the scent of jasmine soap and sickness, love and impending loss. As she was escorted to the waiting Mercedes, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the tinted window, a young woman in a simple white cotton dress about to enter a world of silk and shadows. The first drops of rain began to fall, mixing with her tears. Inside the car, Mantovani sat reading financial reports on his tablet, as casual as if he'd just purchased stocks rather than a human being. "Your room at the mansion is prepared," he said without looking up. "Tomorrow we'll visit Valentino for your wedding dress. Something virginal, I think. White lace, pearls. The media loves a fairy tale." Elena stared out the window as her childhood home disappeared behind curtains of rain. Her father stood in the muddy yard, the briefcase of blood money clutched to his chest, looking like a man who had just made a deal with the devil himself. The radio played softly, Maria Bethania crooning about love and loss. As the convoy wound through the mountains toward São Paulo, Elena made a silent vow. She would survive Augusto Mantovani. She would endure whatever cruelties awaited her in his gilded cage, but she would never, ever let him break her spirit. Thunder crashed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled, counting down the hours to a wedding that would be anything but holy. In her pocket, Elena's fingers closed around a small object, her grandmother's rosary, passed down through generations of Ribeiro women. Each bead felt like a prayer, a hope, a rebellion against the fate that had been chosen for her. The storm intensified as they drove on, rain lashing the windows like tears from heaven itself. And in the back seat of that luxury car, speeding toward a destiny she never chose, Elena Ribeiro began to plan her survival in a world where love was currency and marriage was a death sentence. Little did she know that within Mantovani's mansion waited secrets darker than she could imagine, and that her sacrifice would unleash consequences that would shake the foundations of one of Brazil's most powerful families. As the lights of São Paulo glittered on the horizon like fallen stars, Elena whispered a promise to herself and to her dying mother. "I will not be another trophy on his chain. I will not be another ghost in his gallery of dead wives." But promises, like hearts, are fragile things in the hands of cruel men. The Mantovani mansion rose from Morumbi's hills like a monument to excess, a 30,000 square foot testament to pharmaceutical fortune built on other people's suffering. As the Mercedes approached the gates, Elena counted security cameras like a prisoner memorizing guard rotations, 16 visible, God knew how many hidden. "Welcome home, Mrs. Mantovani," the chauffeur announced prematurely, his eyes avoiding the rearview mirror. Elena's throat constricted. Mrs. Mantovani. In 2 days, that would be her name. Her identity erased like chalk from a blackboard. The mansion's doors opened to reveal Dona Lucrecia, the head housekeeper, a woman whose severe black dress and silver crucifix couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. "Señorita Ribeiro," she whispered, crossing herself quickly. "Your room is prepared. 3rd floor, east wing." "The same wing where my previous wives stayed," Augusto interjected smoothly, appearing behind Elena like a shadow, "though they've all been redecorated since their departures." Elena followed Dona Lucrecia up a marble staircase that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. Family portraits lined the walls, 3 beautiful young women, each captured in bridal white, their eyes holding the same expression Elena had seen in Trapped Animals. "Natalia, Beatriz, and Isadora," Augusto narrated from behind. "My former wives. Tragic losses, all of them. Natalia drowned in our pool. She never was a strong swimmer. Beatriz fell from the balcony, always was clumsy after wine. And poor Isadora." Her heart simply stopped. The doctors called it sudden arrhythmic death syndrome. Mysterious condition. Elena's fingers tightened on the banister. Each explanation sounded rehearsed like lines from a play performed too many times. Her room was a gilded prison, crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, a 4-poster bed that could sleep 6. But the windows had bars disguised as decorative ironwork, and the door locked from the outside. Dinner is at 8, Donna Lucretia murmured, unpacking Elena's meager suitcase. The master likes punctuality. And... She hesitated, glancing at the door. Never refuse his wine. Why? Elena asked. Because refusing makes him angry. And when he's angry... The housekeeper's hand unconsciously touched a faded bruise on her wrist. Alone, Elena explored her cage. The bathroom held enough designer cosmetics to stock a department store. The closet contained dozens of dresses, all in her exact size. Augusto had been planning this acquisition for longer than she'd imagined. Her exploration was interrupted by a knock. A young maid entered, no more than 15, with terrified eyes. "I'm Marcia," she whispered. "I'm assigned to you. If you need anything..." "How long have you worked here?" 6 months. Since my sister..." Marcia stopped, color draining from her face. "Your sister?" "She worked here too. Before she left suddenly. Please, senorita, don't ask questions, it's safer." At dinner, Elena met the inner circle of Augusto's empire. His son, Ricardo, 40, with his father's cruel eyes but none of his charm. His business partner, Dr. Helio Vasconcelos, a man whose medical license had been revoked in 3 countries. And Augusto's personal lawyer, Silvana Torres, a woman who handled both corporate acquisitions and personal complications. To young love, Dr. Vasconcelos raised his glass, his smile not reaching his eyes. "May it last longer than usual." Ricardo snorted into his wine. Silvana shot him a warning look. The conversation revolved around pharmaceutical patents, offshore accounts, and congressional bribes. Elena pushed her food around her plate, each bite tasting like ash. "Not hungry, my dear?" Augusto asked. "Wedding nerves, perhaps?" "Just tired from the journey." "Then let me show you the gardens. The night-blooming jasmine is particularly lovely." The gardens were beautiful and isolated, perfect for private conversations or violence. "Your father is an interesting man," Augusto said, leading her deeper into the maze of hedges. "Did you know he once killed a man?" Elena froze. "What?" 20 years ago. A dispute over water rights. The other farmer threatened your mother. Miguel shot him. Self-defense, of course. The police never investigated. Amazing what a small bribe could accomplish back then. "You're lying." "Am I?" Ask yourself, what kind of man sells his daughter to save his wife? A desperate one, or one who's already crossed moral lines? They reached a fountain, a marble angel weeping eternal tears. In the moonlight, it looked like blood. "Here's what will happen, Elena. We'll marry Saturday. You'll smile for the cameras, share my bed, give me an heir, preferably male. And if you're very, very good, your mother will live. Cross me and..." He pulled out his phone, showing a live feed of her mother's hospital room. Amazing what money can buy, including the power to give life, or take it. Elena's knees buckled. Augusto caught her, his grip iron strong. "I own judges, police chiefs, senators. I've destroyed men more powerful than your father. But you..." His fingers traced her jawline. "You're special. So young, so pure, so breakable." A scream echoed from the mansion. Augusto checked his watch, unfazed. Ah, Ricardo's disciplining one of the staff. Theft, probably, or asking too many questions. Back in her room, Elena found Marcia waiting with a first aid kit and haunted eyes. "Let me guess, your hand slipped?" Marcia nodded, tears streaming silently. "What happened to your sister?" "She was pretty, like you," the master noticed. "Then, one day, gone. They said she ran away. But she left everything behind, even her daughter's picture." As Marcia tended to her own wounds, Elena noticed marks on the maid's arms, precise, clinical cuts. "The doctor," Marcia whispered. "He likes to experiment, says it's for science." That night, Elena stood at her barred window, looking out over São Paulo's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, her father was spending blood money. Her, Mother was fighting for every breath, and she was trapped in a mansion full of monsters. Her phone, confiscated upon arrival, had been replaced with one that could only call approved numbers. The internet was restricted. Every door had cameras. Every conversation was likely recorded. But Elena had something her predecessors hadn't. She'd grown up tough, working the fields, learning to read weather patterns and human nature. She knew how to survive. Carefully, she began mapping the house in her mind. Security patterns, staff, schedules. Which employees were loyal to Augusto, which were terrified of him. Information was power, and she'd need every scrap to survive. A soft knock interrupted her planning. Donna Lucretia entered with a tea service. "Chamomile," she said, "with honey. It helps with sleep." As she poured, she slipped Elena a note. "Trust no one. The walls have ears. Your only friend here is silence." After the housekeeper left, Elena examined her room more carefully. Hidden cameras in the air vents, microphones in the light fixtures. Her prison was complete. But then she noticed something else, scratches on the bedpost. Words carved by desperate fingernails. He watches, he waits, he kills. Below it, in different handwriting, find the red journal. And below that, freshest of all, don't drink the wine. Elena touched each message, feeling the desperation of the women who came before. 3 dead wives, 3 warnings. Outside, an owl hooted, a sound her grandmother always said meant death was near. Elena pulled out her grandmother's rosary and began to pray. Not for salvation, she knew none was coming, but for strength, for cunning, for the ability to survive where others had fallen. Tomorrow she would begin her performance. The dutiful fiancé, the grateful rescue from poverty, the lamb among wolves. But lambs grow teeth when cornered, and Elena Ribeiro was nobody's prey. As she lay in bed, pretending to sleep, she heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside her door. The handle turned slowly, testing, watching, waiting. The footsteps retreated, but Elena knew her ordeal was just beginning. In her dreams that night, 3 women in wedding dresses stood at the foot of her bed, their faces pale as moonlight, their warnings clear. Find the journal, don't trust the wine. Never let him see you break. Survive. The Cathedral of São Paulo stood against the morning sky like a Gothic accusation, its spires piercing clouds that threatened rain. Elena sat before an ornate vanity in the bridal suite, watching makeup. Artists transform her into Augusto Mantovani's 4th wife, and potentially his 4th victim. "Hold still," commanded Valentina, the head stylist, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the veil. The master likes perfection. In the mirror, Elena barely recognized herself. The Valentino dress, a creation of ivory silk and Alençon lace worth more than her family's farm, transformed her from a coffee farmer's daughter into a billionaire's trophy. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, secured with diamond, pins that felt like tiny shackles. "You're beautiful," whispered Marcia, who had been assigned as her personal attendant. The young maid slipped something into Elena's bouquet, a small red leather journal weathered with age. "Isadora's diary," Marcia breathed. "I found it hidden in the library. Read it when you're alone. Know the truth." Before Elena could respond, the door burst open. Riccardo Mantovani entered, already drunk despite the early hour. "Well, well, wife number 4. His eyes raked over her with undisguised contempt. "I give you 6 months. Natalia lasted 8. Beatriz made it to 10. Isadora," he laughed bitterly. 13 months, unlucky number. "Ricardo," Silvana Torres, the lawyer, appeared behind him. "Your father wants you downstairs now." After he left, Silvana approached Elena. "A word of advice, child. Sign the prenuptial agreement without reading it. Ask no questions. Have no opinions. And maybe, you'll see your next birthday." The organ music began. Bach's Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring, twisted into something funereal by the cathedral's acoustics. Elena stood on shaking legs, clutching her bouquet like a shield. "It's time," Donna Lucretia announced, crossing herself. The walk down the aisle felt endless. 500 of São Paulo's elite filled the pews: politicians, pharmaceutical executives, society matrons. All watched her with expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. How long would this one last? Augusto waited at the altar, resplendent in a bespoke tuxedo, his smile that of a spider watching a fly enter its web. Beside him stood Dr. Vasconcelos as best man, a choice that sent whispers through the crowd. As Elena approached, she noticed details others might miss: the slight discoloration on the altar cloth, old bloodstains, the way certain guests avoided eye contact, the security guards positioned at every exit. "Dearly beloved," the Archbishop began, his voice carrying the weight of authority and complicity. Elena wondered how much he'd been paid to officiate this farce. The ceremony proceeded like a death march. When asked if anyone objected, the silence was deafening. Elena's eyes found the stained glass windows, Saint Sebastian pierced by arrows, Saint Lucy carrying her own eyes on a plate, saints who suffered. "Do you, Elena Ribeiro, take this man?" Thunder cracked outside. Several guests crossed themselves. "I do," Elena whispered, sealing her fate. "You may kiss the bride." Augusto's kiss was possessive, crushing. The crowd applauded as if watching a performance. Perhaps they were. At the reception, held in the mansion's ballroom, Elena played her part flawlessly. She smiled for photographers, danced with dignitaries, and pretended not to notice the betting pool among the guests about her life expectancy. During the father-daughter dance, Miguel Ribeiro could barely meet her eyes. "Your mother's responding to treatment," he mumbled. "The doctors say—" "Don't!" Elena cut him off. "Don't try to justify this." "Elena, I had no choice." "There's always a choice, Papa. You chose her life over mine." The music ended. Miguel retreated to his table, where he proceeded to drink himself into oblivion. As the evening wore on, Elena noticed strange occurrences. Servants whispered urgently in corners. Dr. Vasconcelos kept checking his watch. Ricardo made frequent trips to the garden, returning more agitated each time. During a lull, Elena slipped away to the powder room. Locked inside a stall, she opened Isidora's journal. March 15th. "He's getting worse. The experiments in the basement, the drugs he forces me to take. I found Beatrice's autopsy report, falsified. She didn't fall, she was pushed. April 2nd. I'm being poisoned. Small doses, untraceable. The wine at dinner, always the wine. Dr. Vasconcelos calls it cardiac glycosides, says it mimics heart failure. April 20th. If anyone finds this, know the truth. There's a room behind the library, proof of everything. The real autopsy reports, photos, his first wife, before Natalia, Maria Fernanda. She disappeared in 1995. She's still here, in the walls." Elena's hands shook. In the walls? A knock startled her. "Senora? The cake cutting?" She returned to find Augusto waiting with a champagne flute. "A toast to my beautiful bride." "The wine. Always the wine." Elena pretended to sip, then accidentally spilled it on her dress. "How clumsy of me." Augusto's eyes narrowed. Indeed. As the guests departed, gifting envelopes thick with cash, blood money disguised as wedding presents, Elena steeled herself for what came next. The honeymoon suite had been prepared with obscene luxury. Rose petals covered silk sheets. Candles flickered like funeral pyres. Champagne chilled in silver buckets. "Drink," Augusto commanded, pouring 2 glasses. "I've had enough wine tonight." His hand tightened on the bottle. "I insist." "Actually," Elena said, thinking quickly, "I have a surprise for you. A special wine from my family's personal collection. Very rare. I've been saving it for my wedding night." Greed flickered in Augusto's eyes. He was a connoisseur, after all. "Show me." Elena retrieved a bottle from her luggage, a simple countryside wine her father made. Nothing special, but Augusto didn't know that. She poured 2 glasses, making sure to give him the fuller one. As he examined the label, she switched the glasses with practiced sleight of hand, a trick learned from her mischievous cousin. "To us," she toasted. They drank. Augusto savored the wine, pronouncing it surprisingly complex for peasant vintage. Within minutes, his eyes grew heavy. What did you—" "Nothing," Elena said truthfully. "You've poisoned yourself. With your own wine." He collapsed onto the bed, unconscious but breathing. The wine meant for her, laced with sedatives, the first step in whatever sick plan he'd devised, had found its intended victim. Elena worked quickly. She found his keys, his phone, his private documents. In his jacket pocket, a vial of clear liquid labeled only with chemical formulas. She photographed everything. Then she searched the room, finding what she dreaded: hidden cameras. Their wedding night was to be recorded. For his private collection? Blackmail? Or worse, using nail scissors, she cut the wires. Outside, footsteps approached. Ricardo's voice. "Father, the doctor's here for the examination." Examination? On their wedding night? Elena draped herself across Augusto's unconscious form, arranging her dress suggestively. When Ricardo entered with Dr. Vasconcelos, she affected drowsiness. "He's asleep," she murmured. "Very enthusiastic." Then suddenly tired. "Is that normal for men his age?" Ricardo's face darkened. The doctor checked. Augusto's pulse frowned at the wine glasses. Which glass was his? "I don't remember. Does it matter?" The 2 men exchanged looks. "No," Dr. Vasconcelos said finally. "Just ensure he rests. We'll postpone the examination." After they left, Elena barricaded the door. She had bought herself one night. Tomorrow Augusto would wake. He would know she'd outsmarted him, and then the real game would begin. She opened Isidora's journal again, reading by moonlight. "If you're reading this, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. But maybe you can last longer than I did. Be smarter." The gardener, Tomas, he helped sometimes. The young priest at São Benedito, Father Antonio, he knows the truth. And the walls? Listen to the walls. The dead speak if you know how to hear. Elena pressed her ear against the wall. At first, nothing. Then, scratching, whispers, or just wind in the old pipes. Outside her window, the owl hooted again. 3 times. Her grandmother always said that meant. A scream shattered the night. Not from outside, from within the walls themselves. A woman's voice, crying a name. Maria Fernanda. Elena jerked away from the wall, heart racing. The first wife, the one who disappeared. In the corner of her vision, something moved. A shadow? A trick of moonlight? When she looked directly, nothing was there. But on the wall, written in what looked disturbingly like blood, were 2 words. "Help us." Elena sank to her knees, clutching the rosary. She had survived her wedding night. But in this house of horrors, where dead wives whispered from the walls and every glass of wine could be your last, survival was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring Augusto's rage, Dr. Vasconcelos's experiments, Ricardo's drunken violence, and somewhere in this mansion, evidence that could destroy them all if she lived long enough to find it. Elena Mantovani, née Ribeiro, closed her eyes and made a new vow. She would not be victim number 4. She would be their reckoning, even if it killed her. Dawn broke blood red over São Paulo, painting the Mantovani mansion in shades of warning. Elena stood at her barricaded door, listening to Augusto's rage echo through the halls as he discovered her deception. "Find her!" His roar shook the portraits on the walls. No one makes a fool of Augusto Mantovani. Elena had spent the night following Isidora's clues. Behind a false panel in the library, she'd found it all. Autopsy reports revealing arsenic poisoning, photographs of torture sessions in the basement, financial records of bribes to officials, and most damning, a VHS tape labeled Maria Fernanda, 1995. She'd watched it once. Once was enough. The screams would haunt her forever. Now, clutching a flash drive containing digitized evidence, Elena crept through servant passages. Marcia had shown her. Her destination, Father Antonio at San Benedito Church. If she could just reach him. Elena, Augusto's voice, sickeningly sweet now, drifted up the stairs. My darling bride, come out. We need to talk about last night's misunderstanding. She pressed herself against the wall as footsteps approached. Ricardo and 2 security guards passed inches from her hiding spot. Check the basement, Ricardo ordered. She might have found the room. The room, where Dr. Vasconcelos conducted his experiments, where wives became test subjects for untraceable poisons, where Maria Fernanda had died screaming, her body never found. Until Elena discovered the truth in Isidora's journal. She's still here, in the walls. The mansion's original blueprints revealed spaces between walls, old servant passages, long sealed, perfect for hiding bodies. A hand grabbed Elena's shoulder. She spun, ready to fight, then sagged with relief. Tomas! The elderly gardener, face weathered by sun and secrets, pressed a finger to his lips. This way, quickly. He led her through a maze of passages to a service exit. Outside, his battered truck waited. The church, Elena whispered. I have evidence. Tomas shook his head sadly. Father Antonio is dead. Car accident. Last night, after the wedding. Elena's knees buckled. Another murder disguised as coincidence. Then the police. Commissioner Batista was at your wedding, Senora, shaking hands with your husband. Trapped. Every exit blocked. Every ally eliminated. There's one person, Tomas said quietly. A journalist. Marina Santos. She's been investigating the Mantovanis for years. Lost her sister to them. She worked here as a maid. Disappeared like the others. He handed Elena a burner phone. Her number's programmed. But Senora... His eyes filled with tears. They'll kill us all for this. They're killing us anyway, Elena replied. Just slowly. The truck wouldn't start. Tomas tried again. Nothing. Through the windshield, Elena saw them coming. Ricardo, Dr. Vasconcelos, and Augusto himself, still in his wedding clothes, face twisted with fury. Run, Tomas urged. I'll hold them. The gunshot cut him off. Ricardo lowered his pistol, smirking as the old gardener crumpled. Elena ran. Behind her, Augusto's laughter echoed. Run, little rabbit. The hunt is the best part. She reached the mansion's east wing, barricading herself in the music room. Her fingers flew over the burner phone, calling Marina Santos. Please, she gasped when a woman answered. I have evidence. The Mantovani murders. Everything. Where are you? Trapped in the mansion. They're coming. The line went dead. They'd cut the cell towers. Footsteps in the hallway. Augusto's voice, sing-song and mocking. Elena, my love, you can't hide forever. She grabbed a letter opener from the desk. Pitiful defense against guns, but better than nothing. The door splintered. Ricardo burst in, wild-eyed and drunk. Got you now, stepmother. He advanced, pulling a syringe from his pocket. Father says it's time for your medicine. Elena slashed with the letter opener, catching his cheek. Blood sprayed. Ricardo howled, stumbling back. She ran again, upstairs, down corridors, the mansion becoming a labyrinth of terror. Behind her, the hunt continued. In the attic, she found them, the wives, their perfume bottles, jewelry, photos. A shrine to Augusto's victims, and something else, a laptop still logged into Augusto's email. With shaking hands, Elena attached the flash drive and began uploading everything to multiple news outlets, the federal police, international authorities. The progress bar crept forward, 50%, 60%. Found you. Augusto stood in the doorway, no longer bothering with pretense. In his hand, a revolver. You've been very clever, Elena. Cleverer than the others. I almost admire. It's over, she said, gesturing to the laptop. Everyone will know. He smiled. You think you're the first to try? Marina Santos's sister gathered evidence too, as did a federal agent, a private investigator. All accidents, all tragedies. Money doesn't just buy silence, my dear. It buys reality itself. 75%, 80%. But you're special, Elena. You survived the wine. Outsmarted Ricardo. Found my secrets. So, I'll offer you a choice. He set a familiar bottle on the table. The poisoned wine. Drink it yourself, die peacefully. I'll spare your parents. Your mother gets her treatment. Your father keeps his farm. You'll be just another tragic young bride, overwhelmed by her new life. 85%, 90%. Or refuse and watch them die slowly. Your mother's treatment stops today. Your father has an accident next week. Everyone you love suffers because you had to be a hero. Elena's hand hovered over the bottle. Behind Augusto, she saw them, shadows of dead women. Natalia, Beatriz, Isadora. And deeper in the darkness, Maria Fernanda herself, her face a ruin of decay. Fight, they seemed to whisper. Make it count. 95%. You know what's funny? Elena said, uncorking the bottle. You think you're the monster in this story. She raised the wine to her lips. But monsters don't win against love. Instead of drinking, she threw the wine in Augusto's face. As he screamed, the liquid burning his eyes, she grabbed the laptop. Upload complete. Augusto fired blindly. Pain exploded in Elena's shoulder, but she kept moving. Down the attic. Stairs through smoke-filled corridors. When had the fire started? In the entrance hall, chaos reigned. Servants fled. Flames licked the walls. And outside, sirens wailed. Police, fire trucks, media vans. Marina Santos had come through. Ricardo appeared, blocking the door. You're not leaving alive. Behind Elena, Augusto descended the stairs, one eye destroyed by the wine, the other mad with rage. Trapped between father and son, Elena made her choice. She ran toward the flames. The fire had reached the east wing, the walls where Maria Fernanda was buried. As Elena passed, the old wood groaned and split. Through the gap, a skeletal hand reached out, wedding ring still gleaming. The dead wives had their vengeance. The ceiling collapsed. Ricardo vanished beneath burning timbers. Augusto's screams turned to gurgles as smoke filled his lungs. Elena stumbled outside, dress in flames, shoulder bleeding, but alive. Firefighters rushed forward. Cameras flashed. Marina Santos pushed through the crowd. The evidence? The journalist asked. Uploaded. Everything. Elena collapsed into waiting arms. It's over. But it wasn't. Not quite. 3 days later, as Elena sat beside her mother's hospital bed, treatment fully paid by anonymous donors touched by her story, news broke that Dr. Vasconcelos had been found dead in his cell. Apparent suicide. Commissioner Batista resigned, in disgrace. Senators fell. An empire of corruption crumbled. And Elena? She testified at countless hearings, wrote a book, started a foundation for abuse survivors. But late at night, she still heard them, whispers in the walls. Not of her, apartment, but in her dreams, the dead wives finally at peace yet forever present. On the anniversary of the fire, Elena visited the ruins of the Mantovani mansion. Where the music room had been, white lilies grew, Isadora's favorite flower. She left her wedding ring among the ashes and walked away. Some cages, once escaped, should never be revisited. Some stories once ended should never be retold. Some monsters once slain still haunt the dark. But Elena Ribeiro, survivor, warrior, breaker of chains, had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the price of salvation is everything you were, burned away to reveal everything you could become. In the distance, an owl hooted 3 times. This time it didn't mean death. It meant rebirth. The end.